Fritz, Fish, Wheeler.
Good morning, Mayor. Welcome to the Portland City Council. The City Council represents all Portlanders and meets to do the city's business. The presiding officer preserves order and decorum during City Council meetings, so everyone can feel welcome, comfortable, respected, and safe. To participate in council meetings, you may sign up in advance with the council clerk's office for communications to briefly speak about any subject. You may also sign up for public testimony on resolutions or the first readings of ordinances. Your testimony should address the matter being considered at the time. If it does not, you may be ruled out of order. When testifying, please state your name for the record. Your address is not necessary. Please disclose if you are a lobbyist. If you are representing an organization, please identify it. The presiding officer determines the length of testimony. Individuals generally have 3 minutes to testify unless otherwise stated. When you have 30 seconds left, a yellow light goes on. When your time is done, a red light goes on. If you're in the audience and would like to show your support for something that's said, please feel free to do a thumbs up. If you want to express that you do not support something, please feel free to do a thumbs down. Please remain seated in council chambers unless entering or exiting. If you are filming the proceedings, please do not use bright lights or disrupt the meeting. Disruptive conduct such as shouting or interrupting testimony or council deliberations will not be allowed. If there are disruptions, a warning will be given that further disruption may result in the person being ejected for the remainder of the meeting. After being ejected, a person who fails to leave the meeting is subject to arrest for trespass. Thank you for helping your fellow Portlanders feel welcome, comfortable, respected, and safe.
Thank you very much. First up is communications. Carla, the first individual, please.
Item 886, request of Findy Germany to address council regarding concerns for public safety alongside community action initiatives.
Good morning.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Findy Germany, and I wanted to start off by saying why I'm here. I'm obviously here to speak about public safety and in relation to my life and the community that I grew up in. Sexual violence. What does public safety look like in relation to sexual violence? As a victim of sexual violence, and not the only victim in my community, I see many people in my community that are victims of sexual violence. And as I began this trail of liberation for myself and trying to investigate and trying to uncover what liberation for sexual violence looks like, I realized that the judicial system and the system that is put in place for us to report these violences is not supporting us. In June of 2018, I attempted to report my abuser, one of the abusers who had abused me for most of my life. What I came to find out is that, one, the officer who initially took my report, the officer who initially showed up when I tried to report did not take the report. Second, when I had to file a complaint against this officer because I had to document this. What I was told to do is then follow up again on my own to call an officer. And for me, I've been doing a lot of research, and for me to now see that the Sexual Crimes Unit's website says that it's victim-centered, I don't really believe that it's victim-centered when we are encouraging our victims to then again reach out to officers to take the report. I believe that individuals who are trauma informed need to be showing up to individuals who want to report these violences. What has become very interesting for me as I begun this process is realizing that, as I said earlier, myself is not only a victim of sexual violence, but many of the people that are going through this system, that are going to jail, that are having the effects of homelessness, are entering into sex workers prostitution, are engaging with law enforcement agencies, and that for me is concerning when I feel like the oversight is not really centered around victim. I feel like the oversight is centered around agency and what the production looks like. Over the course of the last year, when I initially began to enter this process, I left a letter in your office, Ted Wheeler, and expressed my concerns for some of the sexual violence that I felt at the time needed to be expressed or needed to be talked about. I received an email from your executive assistant, I believe, and it mentioned how you wanted to know what I wanted to speak about. And in relation to my trauma and trauma informed, I think that that email with the memo that I had left, I thought that it had explained what I wanted to speak about. My concerns overall are sexual violence in relation to public safety. What does that look like? How are we going to help people who are victims of sexual violence? So, thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. First of all, thank you for telling your story. Number two, thank you for having the courage to come forward. And number three, I want to help however I can. So if there's a way, is by way of follow-up, that I can be supportive, will you please let me know? It was Aja Blair who reached out
Correct.
to you. And if there's a way I can personally be supportive and helpful, I want to be.
Okay, well, and so should I just follow up with her again or follow up her from that to?
Yes,
and,
that's the easiest way.
Okay,
Yeah, you bet.
okay, the follow-up is gonna look like for me, I guess we'll talk about that.
Good.
And then,
Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you so much for being here today. My question is, when you said the first officer who showed up did not take a report, what happened?
numerous things happened. So I have went through a process, and it's become an investigative process. What originally happened was, this is private information, but it's also public information because when I entered the sexual crimes investigation for the crimes that I was related to, they wanted me to sign my rights away prior to me even seeing the police report. So
But I just want to be careful that we're not here as a hearing body. And
well, I think that can also be complicated. If we have the chief of police right here, we have many different commissioners right here. I think these are some of the issues that needs to be discussed.
So I want to respect your right to privacy, but I also want to know what happened when you called the police. So would you be kind enough to, my office is right down the hall. Let's sit down and talk. And because I want to hear the whole story, because, in 3 minutes you can't tell
And with
me,
trauma, right? Yeah.
tell me the whole story. And I want to hear the story so that I can figure out how I can be supportive of where you're trying to go.
Okay. Okay, you mentioned something, but it kind of went over my head.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here. We
Yes.
greatly appreciate it, and I do want to respect the fact that this is not an issue that we necessarily want to do in public at the moment. But let me get more info. Okay?
Yes, more info public at the moment. I think that's an interesting concept to think about when you think about community policing.
I just
And-
want to respect the fact that you had 3 minutes today, and I know you didn't say everything you want to say. And so let's create a forum where you can say what you need to say,
Yeah.
and then we can figure out what next steps are.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thanks for
Thank you
being
for
here.
coming in. We appreciate it. Next individual, please, Carla.
Item 887, request of Cicely Johns to address council regarding danger of scooters on city sidewalks.
Good morning. Thank you for being here.
Good morning. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I just want to speak about the dangers of e-scooter riders on the sidewalks. I moved to Portland 7 years ago. I love it here. I moved here because I saw I could walk everywhere, and I feel very safe in my neighborhood in the Pearl. But this all changed on June 11th. I was walking home from the grocery store carrying groceries. An e-scooter rider came around a corner on the sidewalk. He knocked me to the ground. He stopped for 1 minute and kind of said, "Oh, I don't see what the problem is," and he went on. 3 Good Samaritans stopped, got me up off the sidewalk, got my groceries up. I was in such a daze, I almost walked into the street, and luckily one of the ladies stopped me. Anyway, I'm here to ask for effective enforcement of what I understand to be the rule that e-scooter riders are not to be riding on the sidewalks. I'm pleading with you. I almost was hit this morning when I was out walking my dog. So that's what I have
Ma'am,
to
since
say.
you're here, I'd like to ask the commissioner in charge of the Portland Bureau of Transportation. I live and work downtown, and I have lots of interactions with people, particularly out-of-towners who rent the scooters. And I've had many conversations with people about please stay off the sidewalks, please wear a helmet, it's the law, and we care deeply about your safety. I will tell you that the reaction I get is mixed and often is not particularly constructive. But my goal is not to lecture or to be a scold with people. My goal is to make it clear to people that we have a law, that scooters have to be on the road, that you have to have a helmet for safety reasons. Does the commissioner in charge have some advice for how we can expand and improve communication with people using them so that people understand that it's not okay to be on sidewalks and to operate them without? And I can tell you, it's not just a Portland thing. I was in Los Angeles, and there are people on the sidewalks all over the place. And so it is a challenge, but it's also part of our burden to educate people about what our law is. And does the commissioner have any advice for us?
Well, advice for you and how to.
Are we doing some targeted enforcement?
Yeah,
Just to let people know what the law is?
First of all, thank you for coming today, and I'm very sorry that that happened to you. I have also had multiple near misses with people riding scooters on sidewalks, and I take every opportunity I have to educate them on the laws. With this second pilot, we had a first pilot, took them off the streets, brought them back. We had increased requirements for rider education, increased penalties for violating our rules, and increased enforcement. So we are seeing these incidents go down, but that's no consolation to someone who has been harmed.
But I don't see any evidence that the practice has changed. And when I see an e-scooter rider, I don't anymore say you should not be on the sidewalk. I just say, please, please, I beg you, do not ride your scooter on the sidewalk.
Right. And so we will continue with that. Those enforcement efforts, we may need signage, we may need to increase penalties. This is a second pilot, so if we're not satisfied with compliance and enforcement, then there's a chance that we won't have e-scooters.
Well, I've talked to the police. They told me that they have no authority to enforce the rules
That's
of
not true.
e-scooters.
No,
No,
that's not
no.
true.
And hopefully you got a badge number or a name, because that is just absolutely not true. The police are to enforce the law. If they told, and I don't doubt your veracity, but if somebody told you that, they're speaking out of turn. They're not telling you the truth.
But thank you for.
Clearly, we have some
coming
work to do.
today. Yeah, clearly we have some additional, work to do to make sure that if we adopt that technology, that it is safe for people who are using it and those who encounter it. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Hardesty.
I want to
Appreciate
thank you as well, and I'm glad you're not more seriously injured.
I
And
had a huge bump on my head that lasted for about a week.
I'm very sorry to hear that, and I want to empathize. My concern with the e-scooter program, we have this balancing act. On one hand, it is a great form of transportation. On the other hand, people just seem I'll just say it, they seem unwilling to follow the rules, even though we've clearly stated the rules, even though the e-scooter companies have clearly stated the rules, even though the rules are actually on the e-scooters. People still seem insistent on riding on the sidewalk, going in the wrong direction, and riding without a helmet. And as Commissioner Udaley said, as the Transportation Commissioner, if we cannot address these issues, then the e-scooters are not going to be allowed to operate in this community.
Well,
There is a responsibility that comes with the right to be able to use these new tools in our community. And if people cannot abide by the basic rules of safety, and
Right.
frankly, human decency, then
Right.
it ultimately isn't going to be worth it for us to continue this exercise. And other cities have made that decision.
I appreciate what you're saying, Mayor. However, I'm not sure that these e-scooter riders understand the rules or read the agreement that they sign.
Well, we've done polling about the understanding of the rules, and they absolutely do. This is a decision people are making to break the rules. And frankly, we see people breaking the rules behind the wheels of their car, on bicycles, as pedestrians. Traffic laws exist for a reason. People are flagrantly violating them in all forms or modes of transportation. And I hate to think that grown adults need people following them around, telling them what to do and enforcing common sense rules, but clearly we do. We have people dying, an average of something like one person dying on our streets every week in traffic collisions. So, thank you.
Thank you for coming, ma'am.
Thank you,
Sorry
Mrs.
for your
Jones.
experience.
Thank you for your time.
Appreciate your being here. Thank you very much. Next individual, please, Carla. And I don't know if the next two want to come up together, yes, no? I notice it's the same set. Why don't you just call them one at a time? Thank you.
888, request of Gary Coons to address council regarding community efforts to deal with the Oregon Air National Guard's continuous overhead descent landing approach. And 889, request of Andrew Pritchard to address council regarding community efforts to deal with the Oregon Air National Guard's continuous overhead descent landing approach.
Welcome back, gentlemen.
So we're going to share.
Thank you. Thank you. We're going to share our time. You're off the bat. All right. To the esteemed members of Portland City Council, thank you for your service as guardians of the public's ears. Please know that you have the opportunity to improve the quality of life for thousands of Portlanders, and it wouldn't even take a dime out of Portland's budget. My name is Andrew Pritchard, and I've lived in the Cully neighborhood for a dozen years. As the founder and spokesperson for NoJetsPortland.com, I have worked with my colleague, Gary Kuntz, who in addition to decades of volunteer service to Portland communities, currently chairs the East Columbia Neighborhood Association. With the support of over 1,000 Portlanders who've signed petitions and backing from many neighborhood associations, coalitions, and elected officials, we have sought to increase awareness about the issue of overhead continuous descent approaches, known as the OCDA for short, performed by Oregon Air National Guard fighter jets near PDX, and to curtail their use. The OCDA is an ongoing public health issue, an issue of industrial noise pollution in our communities, a private property value issue, an issue of community consent and equity, and most obviously, it's a livability issue. At its worst, the OCDA is intolerable and fundamentally alters the soundscape and psychological landscape of our city. Since we addressed City Council last year, Gary Kuntz and I researched and wrote a dissertation-like letter to Governor Brown, which elucidates the complexities of the issue and specifically asks the governor to wield her authority as commander of the Oregon Guard and take action. Copies of the letter, dated June 17 of this year, were left with your staffers, so today's presentation is working under the assumption that you're familiar with its contents and therefore will not rehash all of its details. Nonetheless, the letter to Governor Brown anticipates and addresses any potential counterarguments to our positions. The letter cites case law and rigorously documents the Guard's dismal track record of ignoring public process and community feedback, as well as the complicity of the Port of Portland. The Port of Portland, and this is crucial, is the proprietor and landlord of Orang's base at PDX, and thus is legally obligated by FAA and NEPA protocols to prevent such detrimental effects to surrounding communities, but for whatever reason has neglected its responsibilities without accountability. Furthermore, shifting flight patterns and noise from an industrial commercial area to a primarily noise-sensitive residential area runs contrary to the aviation regulatory framework. See the highlighted words of Appendix F for more on this. Writing the letter is part of a larger plan to build support for this cause. Multiple local organizations have written letters to the governor, which officially endorse the conclusions of our letter dated June 17, 2019. Today, we ask that City Council join the chorus and also endorse our letter. We aim to prove to the governor that many people, including all who sit on the council before us, care about this issue, even if many misunderstand it or assume that nothing can be done when a fighter jet soars 400 feet above your head. Gary Kuntz will now speak about what happens when we let the Guard continue to compromise our peace and quality of life in the name of defending our peace and quality of life. I'm Gary Kuntz, and I live in the East Columbia neighborhood where I serve as the Neighborhood Association Chairman. In the past, I served 8 or 9 years on the PDX Citizen Noise Advisory Committee, where I gained knowledge about airport regulations and operations. After college, I served for 5 years as a U.S. naval officer and support a strong military and enjoy air shows, but not an air show that runs close above my home. The F-15s are passing only a few hundred feet above our homes as they make multiple tight turns toward the runway.
This is startling to say the least. It rattles your skull and your chest cavity. The OCDA is an industrial practice that's incompatible with residential settings. Imagine if the Oregon National Guard troops, tanks, and jeeps routinely drilled through the streets of your residential neighborhood. No one would tolerate it because it would be considered an unacceptable industrial use for an area that's zoned residential. East Columbia is a neighborhood with a wide variety of housing, including multiple trailer parks. This noise pollution causes people to lose sleep or worse, and disproportionately affects marginalized communities who are no less deserving of a noise pollution-less quality of life. Like reducing speeding on Northeast Marine Drive, I have an eye toward the future. My motivation is to keep our community as a place where my children will want to live.
I think you just took away 20 seconds of our speaking time. Last week's Oregonian told the story of the residents of Whidbey Island near Seattle experiencing a sudden surge in naval jets landing on their island. There are many obvious parallels to Portland's situation, and though the details aren't identical, the fact remains that Orang currently reserves the right to escalate its use of the OCDA at any time and inflict comparable harm on Portlanders. Orang could once again renege on commitments, or future base commanders without institutional knowledge of community sentiments could obliviously expand its use, unless we bring it to a halt. The OCDA must be kept in check, and since the Port of Portland has neglected its legal responsibilities, we are asking the help of all community leaders to pressure Governor Brown to take action. This is not theoretical. The increased use of the OCDA during the testing period of 2017 was so horrible and so intolerable that I had to get involved, not just for myself, but for those who have less of a voice. Why can Orang establish a new flight path over our homes without consent or mitigation, but it's not okay for ODOT to build a bridge over your home without consent, dialogue, or mitigation? Just because the OCDA occurs hundreds or thousands of feet above your head doesn't make it acceptable. This is our reality, and we aim to prevent it from getting worse. And keep in mind that the next generation of fighter jets, which are objectively louder, will someday replace the ones we already deal with. 10 years ago, City Council unanimously agreed to speak up on behalf of its citizens and oppose the use of the OCDA at PDX. See Appendix D. And thank you, Commissioners Fish and Fritz. Nice work. The facts surrounding the conclusions of City Council's letter from 2/1909 regarding safety, livability, noise, vibrations, and population density haven't changed, yet Orang has persisted in expanding the use and frequency of the OCDA. Thus, City Council's own historical record proves the point that Orang consistently ignores the feedback of the
Let me ask you a
community.
question.
Yes.
How much more do you have?
Half paragraph.
So if, I'm going to ask you to finish your testimony.
Yes,
and
thank you.
Prevail upon the mayor to give you an extra minute if necessary. But what I would ask you to do is slow down a little bit so
All
we
right.
can hear you.
And
Because I
also-
know you're trying to race to
Thank you.
get it in, and it's just a little easier
Sure.
to hear.
And move the mic away from your face,
Will do.
because
Yeah.
the sound is very
Because we wanna
poor and
hear what
it's
you have to say.
hard
Thank you.
to-
Thus, City Council's own historical record proves the point that Orang consistently ignores the feedback, and thank you. City Council's own historical record proves the point that Orang consistently ignores the feedback of the community. Though Orang and the OCDA do not fall under the jurisdiction of Portland City Council, its constituents do. And that is why today we are asking Council to write a letter to Governor Brown, which endorses the conclusions of June 17, 2019, and beseeches her to use the authority that she does have for the good of Portlanders for generations to come. And Commissioner Hardesty, since you weren't here last year, first of all, welcome and congratulations. Second of all, I'll let you know, and all of you know, and remind the rest of you that we have a standing offer to meet with you or your staffers to answer questions you might have.
Thank you
Thank you very much.
for your thoughtful testimony again. And after the last time you came here, I did some inquiries, and I did come to the conclusion that you have stated today, which is this is the purview of the governor. But I would be interested in, if you have some of the other letters that other jurisdictions have written, if I could get a copy of those, just so I have some basis for
We can get those to you.
a communication
Yeah.
with the governor, I'd be happy to do that.
Okay, excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And if you happen to have them, you can give them to Carla, otherwise you can just send them in my office.
So we don't have that on us, but what we do have is a sample letter of that Portland City Council could write and that some of the other communities have written. And
Great.
we have copies of that.
Cool.
So,
All right, thank you.
thank you.
Appreciate it.
I will send you letters that other jurisdictions have written.
That'd be helpful. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Very good. Thanks for coming in. Next individual, please, Carla.
Item 890, request of injured and pissed off to address council regarding wanted honest attorney and American Civil Liberties Union, Just Ice.
Good morning. How are you today? Good.
My name is Injured and Pissed Off. I spoke here, I believe, August 7th, and spoke at the Multnomah County Board meeting across the river August 8th, I'm pretty sure of. And I was surprised that this morning that I couldn't sign up for the next time till November, even though 4 weeks or whatever. The subject in November will be Portland, Oregon. Made it to the turd list. And anybody that wants to sign up, they can't sign up till November, and that's because of me. And August 8th, I had spoke at the Multnomah County Board meeting and submitted this paper about canceling my Medicare insurance. And apparently, Chris Barker, injured police officer, August 29th of the Portland Tribune, didn't get the word at the hospital like I did. It's catch-22 when you get injured. I'm sure that...
Excuse me, sir. What would you like us to do?
I was injured very severely. In fact, I learned that there's 27 million people in the United States that have walkers and wheelchairs currently. That's like 6 to 8%
So
of the
again,
nation's
sir,
population.
Please stop the clock. I just want to know, what is your ask of the city council? Right? I've only been
I
here.
got no justice at all. It's just ice.
So let me ask you again.
Just like this police officer's
If I
pissed
can
off.
ask you again.
Everybody seems to be getting pissed off at the Portland City Council.
Do you have an ask for us? If you
I
do,
called
I'd like
the
to.
police here just within 2 weeks ago, and apparently there was a rape at the Hamilton West apartment that went on. Luckily, the police showed up.
Never
she
mind.
inquired about my name, Injured and Pissed Off, and I had to repeat it to her.
Yeah, it's pointless.
Anyways, maybe you hadn't seen this article about uninvited guests. I'll be submitting that to this deal. And Medicare insurance that I canceled, as well as the food stamps, will probably get me kicked out of the Hamilton West apartment. But I don't need medical insurance. Next time when the Medicare has to pay like $150,000 plus, the doctors and hospital will know that they'll be pissed off because they don't get no money next time. I'll give up the rest of my time. Thank you.
Thank you for coming in. Carla, have any items been pulled off the consent agenda?
We've had no requests.
Please call the roll.
Hardesty,
Aye.
Udaly,
Aye.
Fish,
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. Consent agenda is adopted. First time certain item, please, 891.
Partners of the Americas, Oregon, Costa Rica Adult Cultural Exchange.
Commissioner Udaly.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a presentation that comes to council every year. This year's delegation will be introduced to us by Marilee Dia, and this does not look like Karen Graham. This is Luis Angel of the Oregon Partners Adult Cultural Exchange. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Chloe.
Good morning.
I'm Marilee Day. I live in the Culling neighborhood. I'm a very active member there and an active member in the Partners of America. The Partners were started by Kennedy about 52 years ago to improve relationships between the United States and Latin America. And so they had states and countries in Latin America get together and form a pact to visit one another and stay in each other's homes. And we were so lucky to have Costa Rica. Costa Rica is very similar to Oregon, but they're ahead of us in many things. One of them, they have no military and all that money goes into education. So the Costa Ricans are very intelligent, muy inteligente. They also are trying to get to carbon neutral. And not only do they have education and free medical care, but they are now going to be carbon neutral probably faster than any of us are going to make it. And I just wanted to introduce Luis Angel. He's a professor, and he wrote something that is going to be handed in to you about what they're doing about becoming carbon neutral. I am going to interpret that after he reads his first paragraph.
Very good. Thank you and welcome.
Buenos días, mi nombre es Luis Ángel Valverde, soy profesor retirado y represento un pequeño grupo de 11 costarricenses que visitamos este año esta comunidad en Oregón. Costa Rica, país carbono neutral. El nuevo programa País de Carbono Neutral busca ser una herramienta clave con datos robustos, inventarios de gases de efecto invernadero y un novedoso sistema para incorporar a empresas y organizaciones y municipalidades en los esfuerzos del país para llevar al escenario de cero emisiones de gases de efecto invernadero en un futuro de mediano plazo. Este programa comparte una visión de más largo plazo tomando como base los avances que se alcanzan en 3 distintos hitos de la Constitución nacionalmente determinada de Costa Rica, uno al 2030, otro al 2050 y finalmente otro al 2100.
Okay, so what he's saying is that Costa Rica now has a carbon neutral program that seeks to be a key tool to find out what are the greenhouse gases in Costa Rica, where are they coming from, and how can they be decreased. They now have over 96 organizations who are now analyzing their greenhouse gases, and they have now decreased it by 20% just by the fact of finding out what they are. These 96 organizations are corporations, are municipalities, and are the use of cars. They are hoping to, by this method, that they will be down, but they will be carbon neutral fairly soon. Right now, their electricity is is down to almost all solar, wind, geothermal, and hydro electricity. And they use small dams as opposed to our large dams. They don't need any fossil fuels to be able to be on the grid for electricity. They are also moving on to taking away all plastics, although they have a little trouble with the imported plastic containers. They're moving on to sacks and cardboard. They're also having electric cars, and the electric cars have a very much of a no taxes on them. You can get go to the bank. The state banks will give you money to help buy that car, easier than going to any other method of getting money to buy it. And the electricity is free to them at the municipal parks and municipal buildings at this point. So I just wanted to share with you what they're doing. They also are the most biodiverse country in the world. More of their land is in national parks than it is in private hands. So it's a wonderful place, and I hope that you all get to visit it. It's inspiration.
I volunteer.
Me three.
Maybe you can become one of the partners and then see it for yourself with them as your guides.
Marilee, I think you have a group, a delegation here. Could we
Yes,
have
yes.
everyone raise their hand or stand
Yeah.
to be recognized?
We'll suspend the rules.
Commissioner, just if I could note for our visiting guests, my kids are bilingual, and they're products of the Spanish immersion program at Portland Public Schools. And one of the highlights of that program is a trip to Costa Rica.
Ooh.
So they have both, I think it was in 7th or 8th grade, both of my kids had a chance to go to Costa Rica and learn about that great country and its culture. And so it's amazing we're thinking back to a program that Kennedy initiated so many years ago about mutual understanding and building relationships. But anyway, they have benefited greatly from that program. They're both bilingual, and their Costa Rica trip was the highlight of their program. So we're so honored to have our guests from Costa Rica.
Yes, and Hal speaks English, but he didn't think his English was good enough for you all. But I'm sure it was.
I'm sure it was.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for being
Did
here.
you want a picture, Commissioner, before we moved on, or are we moving?
Mayor, your call. Should we do a picture?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
that'd be
okay.
great. Yeah, could we get a photograph up front? Great.
Con alcalde.
You went all this way, you might as well get a photograph.
Well,
Okay.
not that they're worth anything.
Item number 892, please.
Yes. 892, amend the Property Maintenance Code to implement recommendations of the Quality Rental Housing Work Group and to incorporate additional requirements per state statutes along with corrections for clarification.
Colleagues, today I'm requesting that the council adopt an ordinance that will amend the Property Maintenance Code to address mold, lead-based paint, and other health and safety issues impacting Portland's housing stock. This ordinance is the culmination of a project that began all the way back in 2008 when the Quality Rental Housing Work Group recommended code and program changes to help ensure Portland's housing stock, especially rental units, were safe and healthy. BDS, the Bureau of Development Services, staff worked with the Housing Bureau, the City Risk Office, the Multnomah County Health Department, local licensed industrial hygienists, and contractors certified in dealing with mold and lead-based paint to develop a model approach that incorporates best practices with the goal of ensuring the new requirements are reasonable and provide a path for improving housing conditions, which often have a direct impact on the health of our most vulnerable residents. BDS staff also worked with the Rental Services Commission and Housing Oregon's Property Management Asset Working Group that included Northwest Housing Alternatives, Cascadia Behavioral Health Care, Community Partners for Affordable Housing, Human Solutions, Reach Community Development, and Innovative Housing. I'm very pleased to present these changes to our property maintenance code, which includes first-of-its-kind regulations for addressing mold in rental units, as well as new and enhanced requirements to control lead-based paint and pests. The ordinance also ensures requirements for carbon monoxide detectors are met and makes minor amendments for clarity. I'd also like to thank all of the stakeholders who provided their input and their expertise to BDS staff on this project. With that, Beth Benton with the Bureau of Development Services is going to introduce our presentation on this ordinance, and she and Nancy Thorington are available to answer any questions after the presentation. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, Mayor, Commissioners. My name is Beth Benton. I am the Property Compliance Division Manager for BDS.
Could you please pull the mic just a little bit closer?
I can actually speak up if I need to.
Good, thank you.
How's that?
Perfect, thank you.
I'm also here with Nancy Thorington, our Code and Policy Development Analyst for BDS. The original purpose for the amendments to Title 29 was to move forward the 2008 Quality Rental Housing Work Group recommendations related to property compliance work. Because these recommendations were made 10 years ago, I would like to provide a brief history and background for context, and then summarize some of the substantive amendments, and of course, allow time for questions and discussion. Everything began on September 22nd, 2008. That was when the Quality Rental Housing Work Group presented recommendations, including amendments to Title 29 to Council. 7 days later, the national housing market collapsed, followed by an economic recession. Over the next 4 years, from 2008 to 2013, development and construction activities plummeted, and BDS began layoffs. And in 2009, we were down to only 4 code enforcement inspectors for the whole city. One positive note was in 2010, code staff was able to enact the Enhanced Rental Inspections Program as a targeted pilot, which was one of the recommendations from the Quality Rental Housing Work Group. Then, from 2013 to 2018, the Portland economy and housing market began improving, and BDS began hiring multiple positions to meet the demand. And in 2017, Rebecca Esau became the new director of BDS and began a total reorganization. Early in 2018, staff met with Commissioner Udaly and began reviewing the prior recommendations of the Quality Rental Housing Work Group, as well as researching various technical aspects in order to begin drafting amendments to Title 29. By the fall of 2018, a series of meetings were underway with industry professionals, subject matter experts, and staff from the Multnomah County Health Department to discuss drafting amendments related to mold, lead-based paint, and pest management from a technical and a best practices point of view. In May and June of this year, we shared our proposed Title 29 amendments with a variety of housing stakeholders, all of whom are identified here on this slide. These stakeholders were extremely helpful. They provided feedback, perspective regarding potential impacts and effectiveness, as well as offering recommendations for consideration regarding forthcoming administrative rules. In keeping with the purpose of Title 29, our amendments are designed to provide a minimum requirement with regard to potential lead-based paint hazards, mold, carbon monoxide detection, as well as pest management and sanitation, all as recommended by the Quality Rental Housing Work Group. We intend for these proposed amendments to have a positive impact, ensuring that housing units are safe and healthy and improving the quality of life for all Portland residents. And finally, to ensure there is clarity for code language. The most significant Title 29 amendments, which are based on the recommendations of the Quality Rental Housing Work Group, are pest management and sanitation, hazardous materials, specifically lead-based paint, interior dampness and mold, and the required inspection section, which will enable our enhanced rental inspections program. Each of these presents an opportunity to effect a positive change for everyone, especially landlords and tenants, and most importantly, for those members of our community who often face real barriers to access affordable, safe, and healthy housing. So to summarize the pest management and sanitation, There are amendments to several sections of Title 29 regarding pest and sanitation, which will work together in tandem to provide further clarification for pest management and for reducing the accumulation of garbage as a harborage for pests, and to provide language for additional administrative rules. The goal is to reduce and prevent health-related impacts from traditional pest treatment methods and other health-related conditions resulting from inadequate sanitation. This will also help reduce the use of and possible occupant exposure to toxic chemicals, especially in multifamily buildings. Furthermore, having a pest and sanitation-specific administrative rule, we can ensure the application and use of integrated pest management processes for rental properties. Number 2, hazardous materials. This amendment will further define lead hazards and, most importantly, provide language to establish administrative rules for additional requirements related to potential lead-based paint hazards. There is a need to increase lead awareness and provide health protections for tenants and property owners of pre-1978 housing. We are planning for the forthcoming administrative rules to provide an opportunity for continued education for landlords and tenants regarding the potential hazards of lead-based paint, and to provide for additional requirements to ensure everyone working on pre-1978 residential dwellings where painted surfaces will be disturbed are trained and certified as a renovator in keeping with the State of Oregon's adopted requirements under the EPA Renovation, Repair, and Painting Rule, also known as RRP, to ensure safe work practices are followed and to reduce possible exposure to lead paint hazards. The Quality Rental Housing Work Group recommended that we define and eliminate excessive moisture that creates conducive conditions for mold growth and to require remediation. It is well proven that mold is a symptom of an underlying moisture problem, and the key to mold control is moisture control. For many, there can be direct health effects from increased exposure to mold spores. Attempting to regulate mold activity is not an easy proposition because there are no scientifically measured standards and no determined safe levels, and this challenge has been playing out across our nation for the past 18 years. To quote the New Jersey Department of Consumer Affairs from 2015, the department will not promulgate regulations for mold remediation because there has been no universally accepted technical contamination on clearance levels, unquote. This is significant because 4 years later, in 2019, still there are no national nor scientific standards regarding mold spore levels related to specific health impacts. In fact, the State of Oregon Health Authority, through their Public Health Division of Environmental Health, does not regulate nor test for mold. Not only will the City of Portland be one of only a few municipalities in the nation that cites mold as a violation condition in our local property maintenance code, we are also going to try something slightly different. Because we know that mold is a symptom of a moisture problem, we will not be attempting to measure quantities of mold spores for which there are no standards. We do intend, through this title amendment and administrative rules, to focus on moisture control as both a required correction and a preventative measure, and to also establish treatment criteria based on the presence of mold and specifying who can perform the work. I would also like to add that we were fortunate that staff from Legal Aid shared a copy of the presentation of our proposed amendments that we gave to the Rental Services Commission with Dr. George Songas, a retired professor emeritus of mechanical engineering with Portland State University and a nationally recognized building scientist with 40 years of experience specializing in moisture and mold issues in housing. As a result, Dr. Songas contacted our team and has offered his technical guidance on these amendments. He has also generously offered to work with us moving forward and to provide additional training for our inspectors. Number 4, required inspection section. The amendment of the required inspection section will enable the creation of an administrative rule to provide the framework for the ERIP, or the Enhanced Rental Inspection Program, and also allow us to make additional ERIP-triggered inspections. ERIP functions this way. An inspection is performed based on a tenant complaint or referral from police or other agencies. If the identified violations found during the inspection exceeds more than 2 violations in either 2 of 5 categories, such as fire life safety, no utilities, electrical issues, for example, then we request to inspect additional rental units. This program has been expanded citywide, and operating with additional requested inspections as voluntary. This program is valuable. It only applies to rental units, and typically, most ERIP cases involve older multifamily units, which represent a large number of the affordable housing units here in Portland, whereby maintenance and upkeep throughout a building and the individual units is critical. Finally, we recognize the value in involving a wide variety of community members and housing stakeholders in drafting regulations. Therefore, we plan to engage a variety of tenant, landlord, and community groups as we draft administrative rules. And as promised, we plan to return to present our drafts to the Rental Services Commission, Housing Oregon, and the Housing Development Centers Working Group for their input, their support, but most importantly, to ensure that all viewpoints and all concerns are considered from an equity perspective. Now I'll be glad to entertain any questions.
Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you. I appreciate your presentation. You talked about mandated inspections, and then you talked about complaint-driven inspections. So what's the difference in the two, and what triggers one versus the other?
Excellent question. Currently, what triggers all of our inspections, they are all complaint generated. So everything starts from a complaint or referred complaint. The mandatory inspections, what we're referring to there is the secondary post-inspection that becomes an ERIP case, the enhanced rental. So if we receive a complaint at a rental unit and we do that inspection, if there are enough violations present based on our 5 categories, then that triggers additional inspections of that landlord's rental units. So it may be all of the remaining units in that building. It may be a percentage of units in the complex. It depends on the size of that particular property.
And can a tenant file a complaint anonymously?
Anyone can file a complaint. We keep the complainant information anonymous.
To the extent the law allows that.
I'm sorry.
Well, it's anonymous to the extent the law allows that. That
Correct.
I'm sure will be challenged both by the media and in court, and I'm not actually entirely confident we can keep that information confidential.
Well, I mean, I asked the question because clearly I live in a community that has some poorly maintained affordable housing units. And if you're a tenant and you're living in a poorly maintained apartment complex, it's not to your advantage to turn in your landlord to tell someone how horribly bad your unit is, especially when you can't afford to move. So I do think that that's a critical issue, that through the administrative rules process, we have to create a safe place that people can say this is the problem without them being negatively impacted by that. So I don't know if that means a whistleblower protection. I don't know what it means. I don't know what it looks like because I did not go to law school.
You mean like a no retaliation provision?
Yes, exactly. I mean, yeah, right. There has to be something in there that makes it okay for a tenant to be able to turn in their building without them ending up on the street.
Mayor? Commissioner Udaley, then Commissioner Fish.
Thank you for the presentation. First, is the Bureau still on track to implement rental inspections for all units? So getting away from the complaint-driven system to mandatory inspections?
That has not fully been determined at this point. Today, we're just bringing these amendments for these particular subjects.
Okay. And I have a scenario, a real-life scenario for you that I'd like to share. A friend of mine rents from a landlord in North Portland who owns multiple older properties. He is aware that there is mold in his buildings, and he has his tenants sign a document when they move in acknowledging that they know that there is mold there and taking responsibility to regulate it, and also taking responsibility for any damage that's caused by the mold.
Legal?
Is this legal? I don't think it is. And will these amendments help us enforce on landlords like that?
I believe they will. I can't speak to whether or not that's legal or not. Ultimately, based on Title 29, it's the property owner's responsibility to maintain their property at these minimum level thresholds. So if we get a complaint for mold and we identify mold, ultimately it's going to be the property owner's responsibility to correct that problem.
Commissioner, you are right. My lease agreement actually says that if mold shows up, somehow it's my responsibility because I failed as a tenant to make sure that moisture was cleared up in my apartment. So, and I asked about it, and the answer was it's just standard language in the contract. So I do think that there's a difference between what we want to do and what the current reality is that we need to take into account.
So there is mold that can be caused by tenant behavior, like if you're running a humidifier, if you've got boxes stacked up against a wall, there are, but in this instance, this is a landlord that knows that he has a mold problem in the building that is not related to tenant behavior. It's related to the condition of his building, and he is trying to move that responsibility off of himself and onto the tenants. As far as retaliation, one of the great side effects of relo is that landlords are less likely to retaliate. And one of the things that we heard from BDS, which was in my portfolio at the time that we passed relo, is that they did see an increase in requests for inspections because tenants felt like they had some insurance against retaliation. Landlords can make your life miserable in other ways, though, so that is why I think that we just need mandatory inspections, and we need to get away from a complaint-driven process, because the people who complain are people who feel entitled to complain and know how to navigate our system and have feel some kind of security in their housing, and that certainly does not describe many of our renters, especially if they are low income or people of color.
I totally agree, and we recognize that as an issue.
Mayor? So I was housing commissioner back in 2008, and that slide brought back a flood of memories. Quality Rental Housing Work Group came out with their recommendations. There were a lot of good ideas, but no way to pay for them. Then we hit the worst recession in our lifetime, and in fact, for the next 3 years, about the only construction that occurred in the city was affordable housing, thanks to stimulus dollars and thanks to other tools that we had. The concern that I have on any of these programs is that we have the staffing and the resources to actually do the job. Because when we announce that we're going to start doing something like inspections and we're putting this into our code, we have to have the resources to make sure that we can deliver. So in connection with this code change, how many people will be assigned to this task, and what is the budget ask?
The good news is there is no budget increase or ask. We are fully staffed currently. We have approximately, I'm not sure how many housing inspectors, about 19, I believe, that will be handling all of these inspections. We also have senior housing inspectors in place also.
So 19 people whose job it is just to do rental inspections, or who are housing inspectors who will also be doing this work?
Correct. They do.
Which of the two?
They do housing inspections and rental inspections. They're all considered
I see.
minimum property maintenance
I see.
inspections.
Is that enough?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, for now. Now, and we'll want to track that. And you say no budget ask because it's already funded within the Bureau of Development Services base budget?
Correct.
Okay, so let me take you to another hypothetical. An inspector gets into the apartment and is looking for things like mold and asbestos and other things that we regulate, but also determines that there are some life safety issues. How do we make sure that we're coordinating with the Fire Bureau and our other professionals so that we're not fixing one problem but overlooking another? And I'll give you some examples. Overloaded circuits, newspapers stacked by a fireplace, all kinds of things, clutter and other things. all of these are things that produce risks for homeowners and and tenants, but technically don't fall within your purview. They are things that in the past we've talked about having Fire Bureau people do door to door. Well, maybe they do fall within your purview. You're nodding, so they do?
Yes, they do, sir.
So if someone walks into an apartment to do an inspection based on a complaint around mold, and they see life safety issues, they can flag those as well?
Absolutely. We do a complete, full property maintenance inspection. We look for smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors, damaged flooring, peeling paint, plumbing leaks. We're looking for every violation we can find. It's just, whatever the complaint is what gives us the opportunity to enter for that
So it
inspection.
gets you in the door, but whatever you find there, you document.
Correct,
And then you put the landlord and the tenant on notice once you've done that.
correct.
So, I mean, things like a non-functioning fire detector alarm, that's something that has to be remedied immediately.
Correct.
Other kinds of things are more subtle. So, good to know. So you have 19 people who will be responding to complaints, and you do a full-service inspection, so whatever you find while you're there, and they're documented. And have you made some projections as to how many complaints you anticipate handling in the first year?
No, not exactly. This kind of falls under the purview of the complaints that we're receiving now. It's just the way we're going to handle these violations. We're going to have some extra tools in our toolbox.
I see. Okay, thank you very much.
Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Commissioner. And I want to close the loop. So you find these fire violations, then are you in communication with the fire marshal? How do we close the loop? What happens after you write all that stuff down?
We issue a formal notice of violation to the property owner. They're giving a certain amount of time to bring those repairs into correction and call for a reinspection. If they don't, they are fined.
So how does fire know that there's a more severe fire danger, say, here rather than somewhere else?
Like a sprinkler system deficiency or wholesale
Okay,
violations of smoke
that would be
detectors?
more of a commercial setting. We would alert them at that time. But we would-
Say that
We would
again?
alert fire at the time of the inspection. A lot of the sprinkler inspections are done through our Chapter 13 program inspections, which is older multifamily
We have
buildings.
sprinkler, I live in
Right. Mm-hmm.
a rental apartment building, and we've got sprinklers. So I think what the commissioner is asking is, what is the trigger that has, the threshold you have to meet in terms of an inspection that automatically requires a referral to the marshal, so the marshal can do his or her own follow-up if necessary? Fire marshal.
It would be the level of the violation that the inspector is viewing during that inspection, which is going to vary inspection to inspection. The trigger for the fire marshal is going to be for multifamily buildings because it's commercial and that's where they have authority. The fire marshal, I don't believe, has authority in single-family dwellings.
Right.
Well, right, but we already know the multifamily apartment dwellings that don't have, say, a fire escape or don't have sprinkler systems in place, right? We actually already know that. So if you're going into one of those places due to a complaint-driven process, the question is whether or not the fire marshal is also engaged in that dialogue. And it doesn't sound like they are at this point. It
Normally,
just
they're
sound-
not, because we're looking to make sure that each unit meets the building code requirements for smoke detectors in that
So-
unit. And so we're checking to make sure that the ones that are there are operational, and then also if they are missing, that they are flagged to be replaced.
So this sounds like as part of the administrative rule writing process that we may want to engage the fire marshal and figure out a proactive way that we can actually get more impact for the limited resources that we have. Because it seems like unless the fire marshal is notified, then they have no impetus to actually prioritize that property as they're trying to decide where they're going to do inspections, right? I mean, if your folks are already doing it and you're meeting a fire marshal standard, they need to know that because then they can take it off of their priority list. And so I just want to make sure we're not duplicating efforts and all of us ending up in the same building on different days for the same kind of inspection.
Absolutely, it makes perfect sense. We are already in communication with the fire marshal, so we will make sure we add this information to those conversations.
Well, and have a more formal process so that we all know
Absolutely.
who does what, when, and why. Thank you.
Very good. Any further questions?
I just love these geeky conversations.
Public testimony on this item, Carla.
Yes, we have 4 people signed up.
Very good.
The first
Thank
3
you.
are Diana, Maggie, and Lightning.
Very good. Thank
And
you for your
Thank you
presentation.
very much for your
Well done.
feedback. That's been very helpful.
To be continued.
Thank you, yes.
Thank you.
Very fascinating stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Good morning. Morning.
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Diana, and I heard a lot of good stuff in regards to Title 29 and amending that to make it more suitable for the citizens and people who reside here in Portland. There are a lot of good questions asked, and some of the questions that I have is in regards to the training. Who is going to be participating in this training? Will landlords that are registered and known to be landlord owners, will they be mandated to participate in this training so they can be educated on the updates that are coming down and the requirements that they must fulfill? Other questions that I have is what happens to the families and the tenants that are identified in a unsuitable, unhealthy living situation? Where are they going to go? Is this going to cause further displacement, or will we be setting up provisions to take care of these families and tenants that need shelter? The last thing we want to do is push someone on the streets. However, safety is of the utmost importance, and I don't feel that lack of shelter in this sense is an excuse. So I think that needs to be at the forefront of everyone's minds, because it does take a lot of courage to complain, especially because being a tenant and you're complaining about the property that you're living at, there are ramifications, there are ways that landlords can just bite at the tenant in a passive-aggressive way. So the other thing that I was wondering is whether or not BDS would be open to establishing a complaint web portal in a way that would allow people to file complaints through a system that would be assigned a tracking number, so that if it ever goes forward, there could be that level of confidentiality maintained, because it's not giving tenant information, it's giving a tracking number information instead, saying these are the things that have been brought up to our attention and we want to inspect these things. And with that, it also will produce data. So when this gets brought up again, there is something substantial that can be pulled and drawn on, even if it's creating a hotline number, and then with each hotline number, there's a spreadsheet that is generated, and in that spreadsheet specifically for complaints, you have a tracking number. So I think that this is a good thing, but there are a lot of things to be figured out in the process.
Thank you. I actually think that's an excellent idea, and I will ask staff at the end, because I think we may be on track with that, right? So, but your point is extremely well taken. Great idea. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Okay, hi, Maggie, Portland Homeless Town Hall. I know somebody who could be described as a Cascadia patient in that he's neurologically different from the rest of the population. And he was put in an SRO, and I don't know if the SRO is different from the shelters or the subsidized housing, but he left both due to the conditions of the unit and because of the noise factor, probably thin walls, and cheap housing he could hear the neighbors. And when you're neurologically different, being in a noisy atmosphere isn't good. When you're neurologically different, being exposed to toxins is a much more impactful on somebody who's disabled than somebody who's healthy and can do something. And he left, and he's currently homeless and has been on the streets, I think now, for the last 4 or 5 years. He just left the unit. And so, we have people who are disabled, who are leaving units that are awful. And they're choosing to sleep out on the streets rather than sleep in units that are so awful. Now, are these SROs and shelters subject to the same conditions? And as I would like to make one recommendation regarding moisture control and heat. When you're a low-income tenant, you can't afford electricity. So just give people free electricity for the coldest 6 months out of the year. And that's pretty easy. All you got to do, put a solar panel up on the roof. Free electricity. Okay, so the last thing I have to say is about the noise complaint from the Columbia neighborhood. In the Salvation Army.
Maggie, that's
Yes,
off
this is
topic.
totally on point. Okay, we're talking
have
about
1 sense to
industrial
pull it in.
noise here.
No,
We're talking
we're
about
not.
livability.
No.
We're
No,
talking
we're
about.
talking
We're
about
not.
a
We're
rental
not. Thank you.
inspections
We
program.
have a busy agenda today, but thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Lightning. I represent Lightning Super Connectomics. One of the concerns I have on this is on the complaint-driven, is that I do not want that to remain confidential. I think that should be open to the public. Now, as far as on retaliation, any judge is going to look at that if you're filing your complaints and then they retaliate. That's a pretty clear-cut case normally. Now, issue number 2 is that if you do the inspection and you find over five items that are wrong, I don't think it should open up the whole building to be inspected. I think that should be on a case-by-case analysis per tenant, because in my experience is that when you own a building and you have maintenance slips that people can fill out, present that to either the manager, or they tend to get things done. Now, let's just say that some people don't. What you run into is when you bring in the city of Portland is the cost is going to go up tremendously. That's number one you have to look at from the owner's position and the manager's position, because now you have a kind of a third party in the middle of this telling you what you need to do, when it needs to be done, and we'll come back and re-inspect it, and if you don't, we're going to hit you for fines. So what you end up doing is escalating the costs tremendously, whereas opposed if the manager, direct communication to the manager in a reasonable manner and say, just assist me on this, see what you can do. And if they're trying to help you, the last thing you want to do is call BDS, because all they're coming in to do is cost recovery, fines, how much money they can make, and how they can support the people they're sending out to the properties. And what normally happens past that point, it can be passed on to rent increases. It can be passed on to just keeping the unit empty. It's just too much problem anymore. So that we need to be very cautious on that. And again, I didn't see anything on fire extinguishers being mandatory in the units. I would like to see that mandatory and inspected, because plain and simple, a small kitchen fire can be put out immediately if the extinguisher is close and ready to grab. But that small kitchen fire can end up burning half the building up if it's not there. And it's a very fast response to make sure it's put out immediately. And that's what needs to really be done from a safety issue in these apartments. And just again, from my position, tenants need to work with their managers in a responsible, respectful manner. There doesn't have to be confidentiality. And let the manager and the landlord understand your next move may be to go to BDS, which will increase your cost tremendously. So why don't we work together, live here peacefully, and enjoy where we're living? Thank you.
Thank you.
I would
Thanks all
like the
three.
rest of my time back to address
No, Mayor, come on.
No, thank you very much. You made good points today. Okay, here, 20 seconds, please. Go ahead and make your point.
Well, one thing you have in a lot of these older units is, older wiring and space. And what happens is it starts to rain and somebody's got their appliance plugged in and on. Could be a radio, could be a refrigerator, could be an oven. I've seen all three cause electrical fires. And so they need to go in and check these electrical wiring.
Good point.
Okay.
Yeah, good point. Thank you. And was there one other individual?
Yeah, Jim Wittenberg signed up, and we've had a request from one person to speak who didn't get to sign up.
Fine. Come on up.
Okay, Margot, can you speak?
Jim, you're back.
I know, and I'm on my way to a football game in Corvallis.
Huh?
It's the only chance we have to win one this year, I think. We might beat Stanford. And then get a conference win for a change. It hasn't happened for a long time. Oh, damn.
Margot, would you like to go ahead, please?
Oh, sure. I can start. Good morning, Commissioners and Mayor. My name's Margot Black. I'm the co-chair of Portland Tenants United, which is a registered lobby organization with the City of Portland. I just wanted to offer a couple comments in response to some of the other questions and things that have come up. One, the reality of retaliation has, as Commissioner Udaley pointed out, changed quite a bit after relocation, and then even more under Senate Bill 608, which makes it much harder to terminate a tenancy. However, and I guess a couple items of clarification there. One, retaliation is illegal at the state level. However, there's a but-for standard. So, Lightning said it's a pretty straightforward case. It's really not, actually. The tenant has to show that the landlord's behavior wouldn't have occurred but for the report for the inspection. And most attorneys will agree that that is a very, very hard case to make and bring forward to court. Also, in terms of the confidentiality of reporting, often, unless a unit does make it to the enhanced inspection level, that complaint is tied to the unit, to the address. So even if the complainant information was, kept confidential, landlord knows who lives there and who called in the complaint. And that puts folks in single-family homes and plexes at even higher risk because it's much harder to see those get enhanced. And so I do hope that we move toward the mandatory inspection model, and I would think that we should prioritize the single families and small plexes because those are the ones that are the hardest to call in on. Related to that, I want to share a story about a tenant, a Section 8 elderly Black tenant in the Coley neighborhood who called Bureau of Development Services housing inspectors who were wonderful. Her landlord did retaliate very intensely and even very explicitly. He told me on the phone and even the inspectors that this is what she gets for calling the cops on him. And by cops, I mean the housing inspectors who came in to see that he had an unpermitted bonus room and a couple of other violations that they required that he fix. He didn't terminate her tenancy because he couldn't. We negotiated her exit out of there with Relo because, in exchange for not suing him for other things. But that negotiation happened as a result of him essentially bullying and harassing her after calling BDS. And like I said, he made that very explicit to me. He even said she should know she's not wanted here after calling the cops. He also told the BDS inspectors that. And I think that in that case, BDS should be obligated in some way to A, inform the landlord of their obligations to not retaliate, inform the tenant of their rights to not be retaliated against. And in situations like that, there should be someone that BDS can report that to. And right now, it's no one's job. There's a landlord can basically tell an inspector all the ways they're breaking landlord-tenant law, and the inspector can't. There's nowhere to give that information. There's nothing to do with that. And I think that is a problem. We have a lot of folks in agencies representing really vulnerable people who see a lot of violations of landlord-tenant law outside of building code and can't do anything about it.
Thank you. Thank you. And Jim, I am in receipt of your petition here. It's not directly related to what we're discussing, so please keep your testimony related. Thank you.
The only reason I'm down here is because I'm on my way to Corvallis because there's a football game this weekend. We might be able to beat Stanford for the first time in many, many years and win a conference game. Secondly, I've turned 80 this year. I'm 80 years old, and this has not been a good year. I've been in the hospital now 16 times since January when I had a massive heart attack and had pneumonia and almost died. One of the things that I list on each hospital form are the allergies. And the allergies are lisinopril, which is for a cough, I get a cough from it. But it's also for yeast and for mold. Those are the three things I have trouble with. So the last two apartments I've had on Northeast Portland, one was I used during a campaign I was working in. I couldn't stay there because it had mold in it. The second one had mold in it, and they were selling drugs in the apartment building. That was out on Russell and Williams Avenue. The problem with mold is that you can't get your breath and can't get your air into it. And it's hard to prove to most people that it's as dangerous as it is. Dr. Richard Baer, in 2004, I think I was running against you, Nick, I can't remember, but just as a lark.
Those are the good days.
Yeah, those are the great days. But we had he helped, supported me and gave me some money, I think $100 or something. He's a great guy, but he worked on lead. And his big as a doctor was to work on the lead in apartments because it was killing and making brain dead the little kids that were coming up. So it's these are very, very important issues, or I wouldn't have wasted your time here. The last thing, I put an initiative on the ballot in 1978, and I said that we should only pay 1.5% for 1,000 property tax in Oregon, and we got 209,000 signatures, which is still a record, I believe, in Oregon, and we didn't pay for any signatures. We paid no money to anybody. So I'm experienced in doing that. That's 40 years ago, 41 years ago. The reason I have this up here now is I made a mistake then. It should have been anybody over 60 shouldn't be paying property taxes. That would include my dad, who's now dead, never got to, and my brother, who's dead, and many friends who are dead also, because they need that money, many of them, to take care of their houses, which they've paid for 40, 50 years. And now they're starting to fall apart. My lady friend's house up here on last thing is, she contracted mold in her house and didn't have the money to take care of it. And that's right there by where Darcel lives, if you know the area. And she has a beautiful house, but it's now mold infested. And I'm trying to help her the best I can, but it's very, very expensive. Anyway, thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you both. Appreciate it.
Please root for Oregon State. This is the one chance they have this year, I think, to win a game.
We'll take that one to the bank, Jim. Thanks for being here. I just want to make a quick acknowledgement. Virginio Marola is here. He is the mayor of Bologna, Italy. Thank you for being here and honoring us with your presence. And we also have the Consul General of Italy, based out of San Francisco, Lorenzo Fortuna. Thank you, sir, for being here. We appreciate it. And I know some of us had an opportunity to meet with you yesterday, and we feel very privileged to have you here and celebrating not only our sister city relationship, but some great events that are taking place at the Art Museum and other cultural issues. And we thank you again for honoring us.
Mayor,
Commissioner Fish.
I've waited over 20 years to say this, or actually 31 years. I want to thank our friends from Italy. My wife and I spent our honeymoon in Italy. And we started in Rome, went to Portofino, Florence, Venice, and Milan. So we somehow missed Bologna, which was a grievous oversight. But we ate our way through Italy and had a wonderful time. And the people of Italy were so warm and generous. And this relationship that we have with Bologna is very special. and as are many of our sister city relationships, but this one runs deep. So we're honored to have the mayor and the delegation with us today.
Thank you. Commissioner Daly.
Welcome, everyone, and I just want to take this opportunity to acknowledge that this is the 15th anniversary of our sister city relationship with Bologna, and invite the public to the Portland Art Museum this evening at 5 o'clock for an incredible exhibit of Italian children's book illustrators. This is their gift to our city for this special occasion of the anniversary, and I cannot wait to see it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for being here. Could we get staff back up just to maybe react to some of the testimony? In particular, one of the questions was asked about creating maybe an anonymous web portal that. There was a suggestion to maybe have an anonymous web portal with a tracking number. That struck me as a very common sense approach. Can you tell me what we already have in place and maybe what the thinking is about that?
We have an online portal where folks can submit a complaint through our webpage. It creates a track it number, so we can track it with a number. They do have to provide their name and phone number and contact information because we need to contact them to gain entry. But we actually encrypt that information when we start the file. So our files are public records, our inspection results are public records, but the actual complainant information and their phone number is, we don't share
Mayor,
that right at the moment.
I have a hard time thinking about an exemption that would apply here. And I think Margot Black also said something that, a very common sense thing, which is once the complaint is made, a landlord has a pretty good idea who made it, particularly in the single family residence area. So I think, I'm not sure our focus should be on confidentiality, because I don't know that we'd win that fight. I think our focus should be on more robust anti-retaliation provisions, because that's if you know, most civil rights cases, people I don't think realize are decided not so much on the affirmative case of discrimination, but on the retaliation side for having complained about it, because it's a much easier case. So I think that's where we might want to have staff look at ways we could beef that up. But I think we're going to go down the wrong path if we think about confidentiality. I don't think it's practically possible. And B, I'd be very surprised if there's an exemption that we could craft.
Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Commissioner Fish. Thinking out loud, to me, it just seems that if you have a complaint in a multi-family unit apartment complex, that you would want to inspect all the apartments in that complex. So therefore, you would not, in fact, be singling out one individual property, but you would say that would trigger that you needed to do some minimum level of inspection of all the apartments in that complex. Otherwise, why would you take one complaint and then come back next year when you get another complaint and then do the same, go through the whole process again?
I totally agree with you, and that's the beauty of the ERIP program. It allows us that opportunity to inspect all those units. And that's kind of the impetus behind that program,
But
which
again,
is great.
what triggers that? What's the threshold? Because
It's a complaint. It's based on how many violations that we find. We have to have more than 2 violations in at least 2 of 5 categories, which on most inspections is not hard to meet. We will typically find enough violations to trigger an ERIP if it's a rental property.
Please don't use ERIP. That just
I'm
sounds like
sorry.
somebody's about to rip out
Our
some
enhanced rental
portion of-
inspections
Thank you.
program.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank
Any
you.
further
You're welcome.
discussion on this item? Thank you for a great presentation.
Yeah,
Carla,
great
please
work.
call the
Thank
roll.
Hardesty,
Aye.
Fish.
Oh, do we have a
what
new?
am
I'm sorry,
voting on?
you Daily.
Yeah, I thought we did.
Actually.
Oh, I thought you called for the roll.
We're voting.
Did
It's
you
an
call for the
emergency.
roll?
Oh,
It's an
this
emergency.
was- Oh, I see. That was just the first reading.
It's
Nope.
the implement the recommendations.
All right. I guess I'm an aye. Guess I gotta be voting.
All right, are we back on track, Carla?
Sorry.
Yes, I'm sorry.
I know where I am now. Thank
Okay.
You said, okay, let's start over. Hardesty, okay. You Daily.
Okay. I was excited that I might be towards the end again, but I'm still in second. I want to thank the Bureau and thank the mayor for continuing on this work. This is one of a handful of items that my office was really hoping to advance while we had BDS. So I'm very pleased that this is happening. I want to just highlight the connection between housing quality and health and equity in this city. We know that we have a preponderance of low-income renters who are living in unsafe substandard housing, and that is impacting their health, the health of their families, and their very futures. And it's completely unacceptable that landlords are allowed to continue to rent these substandard units. And I have explored the possibility of preventing rent increases on substandard units. It didn't seem achievable, but I just want to go on record saying I think it's absolutely outrageous that property owners are allowed to increase rents when they are offering substandard housing. I believe that we need to have stiffer penalties for ongoing violations, up to and including eminent domain, taking the properties away if they continue to endanger tenants. And finally, Diana, I believe, brought up a really great point, which is not only do, Mayor, there's disruption going on in the chambers.
Okay, listen, everybody heard you. Now please listen to the commissioner. Sorry, Commissioner.
I'm not sure what the conflict of interest is. I am not a property owner or a landlord. I am someone that cares about the health and safety and basic human rights of people in the city. And finally, Diana mentioned a concern about not only do tenants have to fear retaliation, they have to fear displacement and becoming homeless. And so I believe these landlords should be 100% responsible for the cost of rehousing tenants in the event that their units are unlivable, and some of them are just absolutely not fit for human habitation. I vote aye. Oh, wait, I want to thank Carrie Lyons, who so passionately pursued my staff to see this through. She once told my director of policy that if Title 29 code change ever happened, she would be happy for the rest of her life. So Carrie, you're welcome, and
Nice.
I expect to see you smiling for eternity, yes. I vote aye.
Fish?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Well, first of all, I just want to say, nobody should find this in any way onerous. What we're talking about here is regulations to prevent mold, which is damaging to public health, pests, which is also damaging to public health, lead paint, and things that are common sense as far as I'm concerned. I want to thank Commissioner Udaly. I know that this is an issue that you put front and center when BDS was in your portfolio, so I want to thank you and your team. I want to thank the folks from the Housing Bureau, the City Risk Office, the Multnomah County Health Department, and they worked with us on some of the public health aspects of this ordinance, as well as the Rental Service Commission and Housing Oregon's Property Management Asset Working Group. So this was truly a community group effort. This was also undertaken by many of the bureaus here in the city of Portland. It's all, I believe, for the better, and I want to thank everybody who helped. I also want to thank everybody who testified today. I thought this was a very good dialogue, and I appreciated it, and I am happy to vote aye. The ordinance is adopted. Next item, please, 893.
Authorize a contract with the lowest responsible bidder for the Southwest NATO Parkway I-405 to Jefferson project.
Commissioner Udaly.
I muted myself. That doesn't happen very often. Oh, wait, I believe Commissioner Fish is president of the council.
No,
Why do
you are.
have the placard?
You are. It goes back to who had it last. That would be you.
Congratulations.
That was quite a power grab. That was quite a power grab.
I wish you had it, then you did.
Good. Good luck.
That's Portland passive aggressive. Just grabbing that gavel.
Well, okay, I'm just going to go on the record saying I really feel like it shouldn't be my turn again, but I will gladly receive
I
the
feel like
gavel.
I should have a turn at some point.
We feel like the balance of power sort of shifted to that end or down here.
You should just feel lucky that it wasn't your turn the first day you got here like it was mine. Okay, let's get back on track, people.
Let's get back on track.
Item 893. This is a long-awaited project that delivers improvements for all Portlanders regardless of how they get around. What began as a pavement maintenance project on Southwest NATO between I-405 and the Hawthorne Bridge has evolved, and I hope you will share my excitement with the results. Through public engagement and coordination with other bureaus, this project leverages the opportunity presented by the reconstruction of Southwest NATO by including new crossings, safer connections, and better signals. Here to give details about those improvements is Gabe Graff, the project manager with PBOT. Welcome, Gabe.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you, Commissioner.
Yeah.
Thank you, Commissioners. My name is Gabe Graff, Capital Project Manager at the Portland Bureau of Transportation. Here today to request permission to bid the Southwest NATO Fixing Our Streets project. Let's see. And you can see the limits of the project here from 405 to the south to the Hawthorne Bridge. Given this project scale and the coordination that's been involved, I'm just here to give a brief presentation. The Commissioner touched on some of the key project elements. We will be grinding and paving NATO Parkway between 405 and Southwest Lincoln and fully reconstructing the roadway between Southwest Harrison and Jefferson. And at the same time, we'll be installing new safe and accessible crossings, including a new signal at the mid-block crossing between Harrison and Market, and a new pedestrian signal at Southwest Jefferson, which will provide a safe crossing for folks from the new county courthouse to the waterfront. We'll also be installing a two-way bike facility along NATO Parkway, where there are no cycling facilities today, and working to address traffic queuing that's impacting the Portland streetcar and many drivers northbound on NATO Parkway by installing a new signal at the Hawthorne ramp. The estimate that we have for the project is $8.9 million. The funding is a mix of fixing our streets. This project was included in our 10-cent gas tax when we brought it to voters, transportation system development charges, some signal maintenance funding we're leveraging, and also funding from ODOT when they transferred Harbor Drive to the city. We expect construction to begin in the spring of 2020 and run through 2021. I just wanted to touch on the effort of a couple of other agencies to partner with us in this work. There's a lot of major infrastructure investments that are happening in this stretch of the city. So particularly, we've worked with Portland General Electric on their work to provide an auxiliary power line under NATO Parkway. So we coordinated with them. Their work is complete. They were able to install new underground power supply and do their vault work in advance of our project, so they didn't need to come back and damage the pavement afterwards. I'd also like to thank staff at the Water Bureau and Parks for coordinating with us on the Water Bureau's Willamette River Crossing project, which will tee into this section of NATO. They're starting to mobilize for that project now, and we're coordinating with their staff to minimize construction impacts to the public. Multnomah County for their staff for coordinating the work around the courthouse and on the Hawthorne Bridge, and then particularly park staff who worked with us and our subconsultant Maya Reed to design more accessible and fitting entrances for the Hawthorne Bowl and mitigate our tree impacts. Here's a couple illustrations of some of those big projects and an illustration of the work that's happening around the Hawthorne Bowl. Will be through this design, planting Dutch elm-resistant elms and a more greater diversity of species, and able to create accessible entrances to the park on either side. I'd like to thank my colleague Scott Cohen, who led the public engagement work on this process. We showed We created 3D fly-throughs of the project and also videos of traffic modeling, and got a lot of feedback on the effort that informed the design. It was happy to show you those videos if any of you are interested at the end. I'll show you a couple of before and afters so you can get a sense for what the project will look like. This is NATO Parkway looking north at the Midlock Crossing will be improving. And this is what the project will look like once it's constructed. Here are at Southwest NATO and Clay Street existing conditions. And afterwards. And then here, this is.
Like flying cars. Were those flying cars that you had in the illustration?
Yes, that's our next project.
Our next
Commissioner
pilot,
Hardesty.
yeah.
We're going right past driverless vehicles to flying
Right
cars.
into flying cars, yes, I see that.
And this is NATO Parkway at Jefferson Street. This is looking east. So you can see the construction staging here in the corner for the county courthouse, the new central courthouse. And this is an overhead view that shows the new pedestrian crossing that will allow folks to get into the park there with the push of a button. And the sort of the reconfiguration to better separate people walking around the park from people cycling or e-scootering and driving.
Are we also going to turn the river more blue
Yes.
in real life?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's how blue it looks.
Love, I
Yes.
love
All
that.
cleaned up.
Yeah. It's amazing what 3D technology can do. We worked
Oh, boy.
quite hard on trying to figure out how we can use this project to solve multiple problems at once. And one of the things that we were able to figure out is the ability to reduce queuing on NATO south of the Hawthorne Bridge. So the tool that we have for this is a new signal at Jefferson and also at the top of the Hawthorne ramp. So if you are driving northbound on NATO and want to head east across the Hawthorne Bridge, you will, as a driver, experience a traffic signal, whether there's today a stop sign. So rather than having platoons of cyclists go and sort of looking and waiting for a gap, you will be given either there'll be a traffic signal that will control that movement. So
That's a huge improvement because obviously the traffic gets backed up to I-5. And it does seem one of the more dangerous intersections, trying to sort of find an opening with cyclists going east on Hawthorne. And then the other challenge, of course, is that some people insist on trying to get onto the inner lane of the bridge, which causes havoc as well. So I applaud that change. It's long overdue, and I hope it both promotes safety as well as reduces the queue time from I-5.
yes, thank you. We expect it to.
I was just going to ask you what you meant by queue, but you've already moved on into an explanation, so thank you.
It's just a nice word for backed up traffic.
That's right. That's right. Line of cars.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good. Any further questions? Public testimony, Carla?
No one signed up for this item.
Seriously, that's kind of surprising. All right, call the roll.
Hardesty.
Aye.
Udaly.
Thank you, Gabe. I vote aye.
Fish.
Aye.
Wheeler.
I have been looking forward to this for a long time. I vote aye. Thank you very much. The ordinance is adopted. Next item is item number
Michael.
894.
Authorize a competitive solicitation and contract with the lowest responsible bidder and provide payment for construction of the Tryon Creek at Boone's Ferry Culvert Replacement Project number E08682 for an estimated cost of $5,360,000.
Commissioner Fish.
Colleagues, this is a really exciting item, and we have an all-star cast of people who will be testifying today. The Tryon Creek at Boone's Ferry Culvert Replacement Project will advance the city's commitment to watershed health, water quality, and fish passage. It will also create safer connections for pedestrians crossing Boone's Ferry Road. The project will replace an undersized culvert that blocks fish passage, with a bridge over Boone's Ferry Road. The new bridge will allow Tryon Creek to flow naturally underneath it, improving water flows and water quality, and allowing fish to access upstream habitat. This new bridge will also allow pedestrians and wildlife to travel underneath it, completing a trail gap in the Metro Regional Trail. This project has resulted from years-long planning and collaboration between and among city bureaus, community members, and of course, our partners at Metro and the state. We have a number of special invited guests that are going to join us. Mike Jordan, Director of the Bureau of Environmental Services, and Eric Brennicke, Project Manager, will kick things off. Gentlemen?
Thank you, Commissioner, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I want to thank you for giving us some time today on your agenda. We are very excited about this project, and I think probably the thing that is most illustrative here is the collaboration that this project is taking and financial contributions from multiple entities, the collaboration on the scope of the project. We originally talked about simply replacing the culvert there, and once we determined that fish passage was a real issue, brought multiple groups to the table, and as Commissioner Fish noted, it's been a fairly long in the making project, but the collaboration has been amazing, and you're going to hear from a number of both bureaus and other governmental agencies along that line. My job here is really just to introduce the person who knows what they're talking about, the project manager, Eric Brennicke, to kind of take you through some of the details of the project. Eric?
Thank you, Director Jordan. The purpose of this project, is to remove an existing undersized 60-inch culvert that carries Tryon Creek under Southwest Boone's Ferry Road and to replace it with a new single-span steel girder bridge. The existing culvert restricts stream flow and is a barrier to fish access upper Tryon Creek and Arnold Creek upstream of Southwest Boone's Ferry Road. The Boone's Ferry Road culvert has been identified by the City of Portland as one of two major fish passage barriers on the main stem of Tryon Creek. The project area is within the middle reach of Tryon Creek and the Arnold Creek confluence. There is also some low-density residential use in the uplands of this watershed. A number of native fish species can currently be found in these streams. The improvements to both Tryon and Arnold Creek as a result of this project will expand upstream fish habitat and will provide significant benefits, especially for steelhead trout. This project is a culmination of years of facilities planning, design, and community involvement in stormwater management, stream restoration, and pedestrian and wildlife advocacy. Currently, the culvert is undersized, poses flooding risk to Boone's Ferry Road, and is also a fish passage barrier. The upstream end of this culvert, as seen on the left, which includes a concrete trash rack, impedes conveyance in high flows. The picture on the right will show the December 7th, 2015 storms that led to debris clogs at the concrete trash rack, causing flooding conditions and risk of flooding to local streams. I'd like to note that the height of the water surface elevation is above 15 feet from the channel bottom, and it was observed that the 1996 flood events were higher than these conditions without overtopping Boone's Ferry Road. And if I move my cursor right here, Boone's Ferry Road would be right up here.
Jeez.
By removing the existing culvert and providing a larger stream channel, all flow events will be conveyed underneath the bridge structure. The bridge will be sized to meet specific design criteria for stream flow while also accommodating pedestrian and wildlife connectivity. Here are the project goals and objectives of the project. Below is a schematic that illustrates the general scale of the bridge span, the depth, and the trail location underneath the bridge, which is located here on the left. By removing the culvert and replacing it with a new bridge, we will provide a larger stream channel, thereby improving stream flows and reducing debris clogs. BES staff have secured all permits required for this project. Staff have also conducted extensive public outreach as well. We have partnered with Metro to secure property and easements downstream of Boones Ferry Road and with Oregon Parks and Recreation Department for construction and maintenance coordination. There are 2 ordinances authorizing BES to enter into agreements with Metro and Oregon Parks and Recreation Department.
Mayor.
Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you. You know, when I see projects like this, the first thing I think of are kids in the community who should have an opportunity, like learn about urban green spaces and fish flow, and so I look at this and I think, oh, this is going to be really cool. How do we connect it to Native youth or other young people who we want to get out into green spaces and get connected and really understand, right? So maybe I'm just crazy, but is there an opportunity that we're going to engage young people in a way that is unique to this project?
Before Mike gives you the direct answer,
Give me an indirect one?
I want to obfuscate a little bit. I want to acknowledge,
That was on the question of whether you're crazy or not.
but you mentioned Native youth.
Right.
And so Michael talked a little bit about who we're engaging, but I want to do a shout out to Laura John, our tribal liaison, because this is one of 2 projects that we anticipate working on in Tryon Creek over the next few years. And she has done an exceptional job doing outreach to the tribes, getting their concurrence and consent to this work. So it's not directly responsive to your question, but there has been a unique outreach to the tribes, since you mentioned Native American youth. But Mike, what are the opportunities for engaging young people?
The education of both BES and Parks both have environmental education units where we interact with young people, elementary school kids primarily, across the entire city, literally in the tens of thousands per year. I don't know, I haven't talked with our educators about it, but we certainly can. We often take kids on site to some of the projects and some of the opportunities to get, if you will, hands-on with the open spaces and natural areas in the city.
So I appreciate that, but I'm really thinking, I mean, we're headed to this new climate future, and we keep saying that, you know, we're like preparing to get young people really engaged and involved. And when I see projects like this, and maybe this is just not an appropriate question, but when I see projects like this, I can connect climate change to the mitigation that we need to do and how we need to engage young people so they're already part of the solution, right? Rather than continuing to exacerbate the problem. So
It's a great idea, and we'll take it under advisement and look for ways.
He always says that when he wants to move on. And
Well-
I appreciate that, but I just think that if we don't take these moments to really talk about the interconnectedness of
Yeah.
this work, that we miss great opportunities.
The next thing we're going to be doing on Tryon Creek is more directly relevant to your concern. At the end of the day, this is a bridge and has certain technical specifications we have to get through, and it's PBOT, Metro, and BES working together. But no, I appreciate you reminding us, and we will look for those opportunities, and we will report back to you.
Commissioner Udaly.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to add my strong interest in working with and better serving Native youth. The Oregon Native Youth Conference is happening in Portland, December 7th and 8th, so maybe that would be a great opportunity. And that's all, yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to see some kids get paid for some of these projects because, you know, going out and showing it to them after we've already given some consultant a bucket load of money is not as effective as actually helping them learn how to do the restoration and the climate mitigation. So thank you.
Good points. Thank you. So, would you wrap things up?
Sure. Early in our design process, we formed an advisory committee. Our advisory committee for this project is made up of working partners. These partners are agencies, community groups, and property owners.
Is there a list?
It's on the screen.
Oh, on the slide. The construction estimate for this project is $5.36 million. We plan to begin construction February 2020 and end construction October 2020. What I would like to do is show a short film.
Tryon Creek in southwest Portland is one of the city's healthiest streams, running from Multnomah Village for 7 miles through a series of parks to the Willamette River. However, this small and aging culvert underneath Boones Ferry Road has been a long-standing obstacle to healthy water flow. From the point of view of fish, wildlife, and even pedestrians, the culvert may as well be a locked gate, preventing safe passage. Now the city is about to remove this culvert and replace it with a bridge. Instead of a barrier, the project will create connections for fish, for wildlife, and for people. Here's how the existing culvert creates challenges and how its replacement will provide solutions. Rather than flow naturally, Tryon Creek is channeled into this narrow pipe, a dark tunnel that fish such as cutthroat trout can't swim through. During heavy rainstorms, surging water from Tryon and Arnold Creeks combine just upstream of the culvert at Boones Ferry Road. Floating debris piles up, and along with the road base acts like a dam, flooding the surrounding areas. Below the culvert, stormwater can flow so fast that it behaves like a hose, scouring the riverbed and increasing erosion. By removing the culvert, the creek can flow naturally, rising and falling during storms without as much erosion occurring. Above the water, the public can hike on trails on either side of Boones Ferry Road, but crossing the road is a safety challenge. Finally, the existing culvert and road not only blocks connections for fish and people, it also blocks wildlife from safely moving between the natural areas that surround the creek. To design a solution, Environmental Services worked with an advisory committee of community groups, nearby landowners, and several public agencies. Their expertise and input led to the current steel bridge design, habitat restoration, and connectivity in and around the creek. In addition to the new bridge, road runoff will be treated to remove pollutants before entering Tryon Creek. Rocks and large logs will be installed upstream, both to protect and expose sewer line crossing, and also to provide a path for fish to move through the area, mimicking the native river environment. The Boones Ferry culvert is one of 2 large obstacles to fish passage on the creek. Replacing it helps fish, including cutthroat and rainbow trout, move more freely through the area. Once the other culvert at Highway 43 is replaced, Tryon Creek will be unlocked. Salmon and steelhead will once again be able to migrate from the West Hills all the way to the Pacific Ocean. For pedestrians and wildlife, a path underneath the bridge will allow both to cross Boones Ferry safely. It also removes the most significant barrier to completing the regional Hillsdale to Lake Oswego Trail. Construction is scheduled to begin soon, and when complete, it will unlock fish passage, improve water quality, and provide a safe streamside crossing for pedestrians and wildlife alike.
Now that's what I call a video. Good work. Would you have to hire a helicopter to do some of those scenes? Amazing.
No, I'm kidding.
Good.
I don't know.
Does that conclude your presentation?
Yes, and I have a slide showing the guests.
Colleagues, we have a couple of invited panels, which we're going to invite up. So we're going to go back to the table. And then I'll invite the first panel.
Thank you.
So we are delighted today to welcome Christine Lewis, Metro Councilor, PBOT Director Chris Warner, here he is, Chris. And is Mike Stewart here? Yes. You're hiding over there, Mike. And Water Bureau Director Mike Stewart. So thank you all 3 for being here. Councilor Lewis, you are an elected official and a honored guest, so would you kick things off?
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners, for your time today and deep review of this. My name is Christine Lewis. I represent the communities surrounding this culvert project and the rest of District 2 as well. I want to start with a hearty congratulations to the many partners across jurisdictions and governmental agencies and community groups who have persevered to bring this project to fruition. The roots of this project predate my time on council. So here we are today celebrating a project that is serving the greatest good for fish, wildlife, water, and for people. This project reflects the voters' support for preserving healthy watersheds, vibrant wildlife corridors, and access to nature, and as approved in the 2006 Natural Areas Bond Measure, an investment that Metro is proud to steward. This is funding through Metro's Nature and Neighborhoods capital grants. This grant system is designed to implement long-term capital investments in projects throughout the developed areas of our region. Our grants have inspired community groups to launch new projects and for unusual partners to work together, facilitating partnerships that may lead to jurisdictions working with community groups to seek creative solutions to challenges that otherwise don't surface. This project meets many of our goals as funders. It encourages partnership along public agencies and an actively engaged community group to create the most optimal capital investment. This project also meets our Parks and Nature Department's mission of protecting fish and wildlife habitat, restoring air and water quality, and connecting people to nature close to home. We're most excited that it's another step on completing the Southwest Urban Trails Plan, which was set into place in 2000, so again, long before I got to Metro, but that work is to connect Tryon Creek to the region's other trail systems. This passage was the most major barrier to preventing a solid connection in this corridor. So I just want to reiterate some of the important pieces. BES had funding and authority to replace the undersized culvert with the bottomless culvert, but couldn't afford the meaningful and safe trail and wildlife passage, and we're excited at Metro to support that addition to the project. Currently, trail goers have to scurry up the street banks, and we saw in the video the gentleman crossing the road in some scary-looking traffic, and I think the cars were driving a little slower in that video than I've seen otherwise. So no crosswalk and a blind curve, and that's a major improvement. We commend BES staff for their willingness to explore alternatives during preliminary engineering and for taking time to apply for the grant. They persevered and will be able to construct a project that best reflects the community's value for wildlife and trail passage and their connection to nature. This cross-jurisdictional collaboration from state to region to city to community is exactly what Metro was created to inspire and implement. Congratulations to everyone at the City of Portland who brought these partnerships together. Boone's Ferry, Tryon Creek community, along with the generations of fish, lamprey, and deer, we will all in the future will have us to thank for their safe passage in this beautiful part of the region.
Councilor Lewis, thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
PBOT Director Chris Warner, a great partner in this project. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you, Commissioner Mayor. Chris Warner, Director of the Portland Bureau of Transportation. I'm happy to be here to express PBOT support for this project and to really thank BES and Water for their continued partnership. We work on so many things together. It's wonderful to have this opportunity to highlight this one. With this project, we're really helping to help the health of Tryon Creek and the natural areas of our city. And that would really be impressive enough, but by working together, this project really does achieve more. When the bridge is done, it will have safer crossings for pedestrians and we'll have a better connection to trails for hikers. At PBOT, we're committed to doing everything we can to protect the safety of Portlanders as they get from place to place. We've also dedicated to supporting a more sustainable Portland by reducing our carbon footprint, and the trails and the improvements here will really help with that. And given these commitments and given what this project does for the environment and the safety for Portlanders, we're happy to be here to let you know that we will be taking on the maintenance of this bridge, the shoulders and the sidewalks and the bike lanes in this area. So this really is clear evidence of what we can do by working together. And I just want to, again, thank BES Commissioner Fish for all the work you've done on this and happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Chris. And we're also joined by Water Bureau Director Mike Stewart. Mike, take it away.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. We too have participated in this project, and it was both interesting and challenging. As with most of the streets in the city, including the one that this culvert went over the top of, there were water pipes there. In this case, they were two 6-inch old cast iron mains that moved water from one side to the other. So replacing this is a kind of a double resilience plus. The pipes could have been washed out in a flood and also could have been severely damaged in an earthquake. So what we have achieved here by working together, and we really had to work very closely, or will have to work very closely, because we have to keep water service in place while this construction project is going on, results in our case in putting an 8-inch what we call restrained joint ductile iron pipe that does very well in an earthquake across the bridge, hung on the bridge. And I think we've done a good thing for our community. In our case, we're investing about $200,000 in this project. Not a great deal, but I think it's added to the resilience of our neighborhood. We appreciate the opportunity, of course, to work with PBOT and BES. We do these kinds of smaller things all the time. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Colleagues, any questions? We have one more panel.
So
Thank
far,
you.
so good.
Thank you for joining us.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
And now I'm honored to invite the following individuals up to the dais. Iris Benson from Oregon Parks and Recreation, Hans Stoich from Southwest Trails, Catherine Daly from the Arnold Creek Neighborhood Association, and Sharon Keast from the Tryon Creek Watershed Council. And we're really delighted to have all four of you. And if I botched any names, I apologize. That's on me. Who'd like to start?
I can start,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of this project today. My name is Iris Benson. I'm the park manager for Tryon Creek State Natural Area. And I am in support in this project, and my agency is also in support of the project. The Oregon Parks and Recreation Department has a long history of working collaboratively with the City of Portland, BES, and other community partners on strategic restoration and trail projects in Tryon Creek State Natural Area. We are located about 15 minutes from downtown Portland, and we're the only state park located in a major metropolitan area. We have almost 15 miles of trails within the state park. It's 658 acres. There's a nature center, extensive programs for youth, guided hikes, interpretation, and restoration projects going on within the park. The Boones Ferry project is adjacent to the park and in an area of regional significance due to increased recreation trail connectivity and restoration of riparian ecosystem function. OPRD is a longstanding partner in relation to this project starting in 2005 with our participation in the planning process. In 2008, OPRD's director wrote a letter to BES in support of an underpass in the project design. The project and multiple partnerships are documented in OPRD's 2013 Tryon Creek State Natural Area Comprehensive Plan. OPRD formally recommended to BES in 2014 the selection of the bridge alternative to provide significantly higher standards for riparian quality and diversity, enhanced fish passage, greater wildlife connectivity, and safer trail passage. In 2019, OPRD continues to support the project, and we are working to finalize an intergovernmental agreement in regards to the project with BES. The completion of this project will prompt OPRD to add additional recreational trail connections of regional significance. In closing, the ability to connect our communities to healthy ecosystems through trails and interpretation lends to greater environmental empathy and well-being. OPRD is in strong support of the project and to the many positive benefits it will provide to both the environment and our community. And to speak a little bit to Commissioner Joanne Hardesty, to your point, our partners with Friends of Tryon Creek are reaching out to a number of indigenous communities, including partnerships with NEA and working on cultural ecology within the park. And I think that there would be some opportunities there in partnership with OPRD. So thank you.
Thank you for joining us today.
Thank
Go ahead.
Good morning. I'm Catherine Daly. I'm the president of the Arnold Creek Neighborhood Association, and it is in that capacity that I'm before you today. The Arnold Creek neighborhood is the southernmost neighborhood in Portland, and our eastern boundary, it lies along Southwest Boones Ferry Road and abuts the Tryon Creek Natural Area. With no city park within Arnold Creek neighborhood, Tryon is one of the closest open spaces for our 3,000 residents in our neighborhood. We support and greatly appreciate any improvements that make the state park more accessible, including improved trail connectivity and safe crossings across Southwest Boones Ferry Road. And that little video that showed the cars coming around the corner, I have been on that road and had people pass me on blind corners traveling 50 miles an hour. It's awful. Okay, that's me. During the phases of culvert construction, Southwest Boones Ferry Road will be closed, and the proposed detour route for 12,000 vehicles per day is through our neighborhood along Southwest Stevenson Street, past the Stevenson Elementary School. To address our neighborhood's concerns for pedestrian and student safety, BES and PBOT worked closely with our neighborhood association. And as a direct result of this engagement, PBOT's Stevenson Street Pedestrian Safety Project began in 2018 with an anticipated completion at the year-end 2019. We support the culvert project for its core work to restore fish passage, improve the habitat for fish and wildlife in Tryon Creek, and improve safety by eliminating the backup water at Southwest Boones Ferry Road in Arnold. At our most recent neighborhood association meeting earlier this month, we held a straw poll and then passed unanimously a board motion in support of the Boones Ferry culvert replacement project. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us. Sir, Hans?
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, I'm Hans Stoik. I'm a volunteer with Southwest Trails. We work on trails in Southwest Portland, including Southwest Urban Trail number 6 and the Hillsdale to Lake Oswego Trail that was mentioned just moments ago. Southwest Trails has been active on the Boones Ferry Culvert Replacement Project Advisory Committee and in advocating for this project, particularly the steel girder bridge solution. We are delighted that walking under the bridge will be much safer than crossing over Boones Ferry Road. And once the bridge is in place, next year this time, we look forward to continue working with city and state agencies on trail connections to the bridge so that the other parts of the Hillsdale to Lake Oswego Trail can be completed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. And finally, Sharon Keese, welcome.
Thank you. My name is Sharon Keast. I serve on the Tryon Creek Watershed Council Board of Directors. This project will result in significant watershed health, infrastructure improvement, and community enhancement. The Tryon Creek Watershed Council has been advocating for the replacement of the culvert on Southwest Boones Ferry Road for a long time, and we were active in participating in the advisory committee during the design of this project. This project improves fish and wildlife habitat and connectivity in our unique urban watershed. This project removes one of two most significant fish passage barriers on Tryon Creek, the second being at Highway 43. We look forward to a time when fish are able to move through the area freely. Tryon Creek Watershed Council appreciates your yes vote to move this project forward. Thank you.
Well, we're enormously grateful that all four of you took the time to be with us today, and thank you for your great partnership and for joining us. Mayor, that concludes our presentation, other than I would like, this is not an emergency item, and we'll take some testimony, but I would like to thank Asena Lawrence and my team who helped organize and script this and did such a great job. And again, Laura John is here, and I want to thank Laura for all the work she does in helping us coordinate with the tribes on our work in Tryon Creek. So with that, the presentation is concluded.
Very good. Thank you, Commissioner Fish. Any questions before we move to public testimony?
I just want to
Commissioner Daley.
note that working together seems to be the theme of the week, and say that I love the interagency coordination. It saves us time and money and resources and saves community members the inconvenience and hassles that come with these kinds of projects, and also the partnerships with Metro and all the community members. I'm really excited to see this project through.
Very good. Thank you. Thanks to you and thanks to the other panel as well. Public testimony, Carla.
No one else signed up?
Okay.
All right, very good. This is a first reading of a non-emergency ordinance. Thank you, everyone. It moves to second reading. And now we will move to the regular agenda, item 904, please.
Appoint Margot Black, Ian Davey, Laura Golino de Lovato, Jessica Greenlee, Alan Hines, Hannah Holloway and Leah Sykes to the Rental Services Commission for terms to expire September 2021.
Colleagues, the Rental Services Commission is the primary public forum for discussion of rental housing law and regulation and renter-owned programs and services for the city of Portland. RSC members provide valuable perspective and expertise as we work to address the rental housing crisis in our city. The appointment and reappointments today allow the Commission to continue its good work and to continue advising the Housing Bureau and the Council on the most relevant housing topics. I want to thank all of you for either being willing to serve or being willing to continue to serve on this important commission. And I look forward to your guidance as one of the commissioners. And with that, I will turn it over to Matt. Good morning.
Good morning. For the record, Matthew Schaubold with the Housing Bureau. I'm just really here to answer questions. We very much value our volunteers on the Rental Services Commission, the time they've committed, and their willingness to continue serving. I would like to note we'd also like to welcome Hannah Holloway from the Urban League, who will be joining the commission, replacing a commissioner who resigned midterm.
Very good. I know we have a couple of commissioners here. I see Margot Black is here. Are any of the other commissioners here today?
Ian and I believe I saw Leah are also here.
Oh, very good. Thank you for being here, and I don't know if they wanted to say anything. I certainly want to open up the opportunity, given that you took the time to be here, if you'd like.
I would love to, but I was told that we wouldn't be able to make comments, so
All right, very good. Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to thank Commissioner Udaley and this body for really moving this work forward. I know that there's really hard work ahead. There's been hard work behind us, but I think the willingness of people to continue to do the hard work is really vital to us coming up with really good systems that support folks living a healthy life in our community. So just wanted to appreciate the moment in time we're in, because I suspect when it was first put together, this room was filled, and not everybody thought this was the best thing that should be done. So just want to appreciate how far we've come and how far we still have to go in this process.
Very good. It's a
Thank you.
report. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Motion from Commissioner Fish, second from Commissioner Udaley. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Hardesty?
Aye.
Udaley?
Well, I want to thank all of the appointees for their service to the city and for their work on the Rental Services Commission. I know it's hard and sometimes grueling. I know that you are taking time out of your busy lives to make this city better for everyone, but especially for renters. And Margot, I just want to say, who knew? Who knew when we first met that we would be sitting here today? I don't think I had ever stepped foot in these chambers back in 2015 when I think it all began. And here we are, and thank you. I know it's been a hard fight, but we are making progress and we're making changes, and the city is better for it. I vote aye.
Fish?
Yeah, I want to just add my thanks for your service and willingness to step up. And this is really important work, so we look forward to your recommendations. Aye.
Wheeler?
Likewise, I want to thank everybody, particularly those of you who have decided to reapply. Thank you for that. I know this is hard work, and you're at the nexus of some very complex and often controversial issues in the city, and I want to thank you for helping us as a council see the path forward. So thank you for that. I vote aye. Appointments are approved. Thank you.
We forgot to thank Matt. Usually we're falling over ourselves to thank Matt.
Oh, you know what? You're right. I want to thank the Housing Bureau, and Matt, thank you for your work. This is a complex issue, and it does take a lot of time and energy to administer this properly. Thank you, and I want to thank my staff as well that spends a considerable amount of time on the backstop on this, Tia, who's sitting over there in particular. Thank you for your continued work and effort as well. Thank you. I vote aye. The appointments are approved.
Sorry,
Next
Mayor.
item, 905.
Appoint Taylor Smiley Wolf to the Portland Housing Advisory Commission for a term to expire September 25, 2021.
Colleagues, the Portland Housing Advisory Commission is the primary forum for the discussion that's related to broader housing policy strategy and resources for the city of Portland. PHAC, as it's otherwise known, the members rise above their individual interests and affiliations to take a comprehensive approach to housing policy and strategy to support the unmet housing needs of Portlanders. The appointment today fills a vacancy on the commission with an individual who is committed to addressing the pressing housing issues and needs of the residents of Portland. I want to thank Tyler for her willingness to serve on this important Portland Housing Advisory Commission role. She comes with tremendous experience, and I look forward to your guidance, Taylor, and the hard work that I know you'll be engaged in. So thank you for stepping forward and agreeing to serve. And I will make the same offer to you. We'd love to hear from you.
Hi, for the record, my name is Taylor Smiley Wolf. I just wanted to come up and thank you very much for your consideration. I know you're busy.
Thank you, Taylor. Any further questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion. We have from Commissioner Fish, a second from Commissioner Hardesty. All in favor, or sorry, wrong meeting. Carla, please call the roll.
Hardesty.
Welcome. I'm looking forward to you adding value to the hard work that's already taking place. So thank you for your willingness to serve. I vote aye.
Udaley.
It's great to see you in these chambers. I know you've been working hard on behalf of our community members for a long time, and now we get to have you right here in Portland. So thank you, and I vote aye.
Fish.
I just want to acknowledge how impressive our appointee's bio is, including stints serving as policy director for my good friend, House Speaker Tina Kotek, as a policy analyst with former Secretary of Labor Robert Reich, and working at the Dellums Institute for Social Justice with a Master's of Public Policy from UC Berkeley. So we're very fortunate to have you. Thank you. Aye.
Wheeler.
Thank you, Taylor. Appreciate it. She brings a ton of experience. I'm excited about your willingness to serve. Thank you. I vote aye. Appointment's approved. Thank you. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
Next item, 906.
Authorize an intergovernmental agreement with Prosper Portland for fiscal year 2019-20 economic development activities for $7,609,120.
Colleagues, this is the city's annual agreement with Prosper Portland that codifies decisions that were made previously as part of the 2019-20 adopted budget. It authorizes the budget director to make amendments following council decisions typically made either in the fall or the spring supplemental budget process. In addition to budget decisions, it highlights performance metrics and outcomes expected to be achieved as a result of programs funded within the agreement. Joining us today are Prosper Portland Executive Director Kimberly Branham and CED Manager Tori Campbell. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Good morning, Mayor Wheeler and Commissioners. Kimberly Branham, Executive Director of Prosper Portland. As the Mayor mentioned, I'm joined by Tori Campbell, who is our new Economic Development Director, and Tony Barnes, our Finance Manager. We appreciate the opportunity to discuss the 2019-2020 Intergovernmental Agreement for Economic Development Activities. This IGA has been updated to reflect the City General Fund budget allocation. Tony oversees the IGA with the City Budget Office and can help us answer any questions that arise. So I'm going to just briefly touch on our strategic priorities and the role of the City General Fund resources, and then turn it over to Tori to discuss the programs and the anticipated outcomes. As you know, our 2020 strategic plan guides our work towards building a more equitable economy in Portland. The IGA and our general fund supported programs largely focus, can you go through? Sorry, technical difficulties. Go back. Okay, well, there's a visual. So imagine the visual that has our strategic plan.
There you go. Well, Carla, do you know why it keeps popping back?
The laptop, is it showing on the laptop?
No.
That's okay.
That's your new
That's okay.
slide, maybe something happened.
Council is familiar with our strategic plan, but the IGA focuses on our business development, technical assistance, community capacity building, and workforce training efforts with the goal of increasing access to quality employment, fostering equitable wealth creation, and supporting the capacity of our partners in this work. More specifically, our economic development programs include 4 major business lines. So this graph shows those programs from top to bottom. You have the Inclusive Business Resource Network, Workforce Development Programs, the Neighborhood Prosperity Network and Venture Portland, our Traded Sector Business Development, as well as non-tax increment finance funded community development programs. Going from left to right, you'll see the associated Prosper Portland staffing levels and the composition of program funding, including city general funds, cannabis funds, federal community development block grant funding, and enterprise zone community contributions. The IGA covers the general fund and cannabis fund portion of these programs for a total of $7.6 million in funding.
Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Kimberly. Thank you, Mayor. My question has to do with the workforce development. We have in your IGA a contract that would be for adult and youth workforce development.
Yes.
With the participants having incomes that are 50% below the area median. How does that support or differ from what Work Systems, Inc. does?
Great question, Commissioner. So we administer these funds actually through a partnership with Work Systems. So we, and Tori can talk a little bit in more detail, but we have an agreement with Work Systems, and they put out the request for proposals. They report to us on what is happening within each of those contracts and how many providers?
There's 12 providers.
12 providers. So we make sure that we are collaborating on things like the workforce navigators, which ensures that there's particular navigation, workforce navigation that's happening within the Neighborhood Prosperity Initiative network. But largely, this is a program that is administered by Work Systems.
Did you want to add anything to that?
That's it. That's good for now.
What's your pleasure? Would you like me to hold my questions until you're done?
I think so. Tori's going to talk a little bit and probably will answer some of the questions that I anticipate.
I got a couple more, so go ahead now.
Could you, so at the moment the question was asked, Kimberly, you told us how much general fund dollars were being invested. Could you say that again?
How much general fund dollars were being invested within workforce?
No, just in terms of the economic development program.
Overall, $7.6 million.
$7.6 million of general fund.
Of general fund and cannabis funds.
Okay.
Yes. Yes? Yeah, okay. So I want to recognize before I turn it over to Tori that these are precious resources. These are resources that are not restricted to the 15% of the city within a tax increment finance district or to the capital development that TIF has as a requirement. So we are extremely appreciative of your allocation of these resources to Prosper Portland. And with that, I will turn it over to Tori. Thank you.
Thank you, Council and Mayor. I'm just going to take a few moments to go through some of the high-level elements of each of the programs. I'm going to start with the Inclusive Business Resource Network. Within the Inclusive Business Resource Network, we have 16 partners that deploy over 65 practitioners throughout the city and that are providing both culturally specific and also culturally responsive small business technical support. Just last fiscal year, they were able to serve almost 1,000 clients, with 70% of those being entrepreneurs of color throughout the city. Also within that work, there's a particular highlight we want to note within our cannabis pilot program. We're now entering into our second year. The first year was taught us a lot. I believe there were some unique successes with respects to two of the businesses that were provided grants for $30,000 each. They saw a notable increase in terms of stabilization of their businesses as well as sales. One, as an example, was able to increase their sales by 143% within 4 months as a result of receiving these precious grant dollars, as well as being able to hire their first employee. The other recipient was able to not only purchase inventory, but also to increase their sales 13% over the span of that year. So we recognize this is still a very necessary program for an industry that is in its early beginnings, and we really want to ensure that entrepreneurs of color have an opportunity to take advantage of this emerging industry and market. The next program is our
Excuse me, I'm sorry. I was going to hold my question, but which particular program?
This is with New Leaf as the
No,
provider.
I'm sorry. What particular one of your economic development programs actually supported these two businesses?
Yeah, it was within our Inclusive Business Resource Network. That's the overarching program. The provider was the New Leaf Project.
Thank you.
The next program is our Neighborhood Prosperity Network, and it is comprised of 7 community organizations with full-time staff, and they are charged to really drive community development with respects to both planning and the implementation of very localized economic development opportunities within those respective communities. Also within our Neighborhood Prosperity Network, there are some additional dollars that have gone to the Old Town Chinatown Neighborhood Association to support that ongoing work in terms of their action plan and building capacity within their organization. The next areas are workforce, which we've already touched on a little bit, but again, as I already noted, there are 12 providers that we fund through work systems to provide support and help navigation of underemployed or unemployed citizens throughout our city, also with an attention on providing opportunities for young adults in terms of being able to develop skills to enter into career paths. Last year, we served over 2,415 through that program, through the initiative and working with Work Systems, Inc. The next and last area within our entrepreneurship and community economic development is going to be Venture Portland, and Venture Portland really serves as a very complementary role within our Neighborhood Prosperity Network. One of their strong and necessary and essential roles is to support the city's volunteer-run neighborhood business associations throughout the city. I'm going to transition over and talk a little bit about the other side of the shop, which is our traded sector. And before I jump into the specifics around our cluster business development, this year we are very excited to finally get to a place where we have revised our action plan for our clusters that really weaves in equity in its efforts. This is something that's a first for us and in many respects the first throughout the country. The theme or the mantra in which we are mindful of is really the goal within this action plan is to help businesses become more inclusive and to help inclusive businesses grow in the city. The work that is happening within our cluster industry, as an example, is over 350 businesses are served on an annual basis. And those businesses, 80% of them are comprised of what we would call small businesses, which is going to be 50 employees or less. I think that's important to note, as small businesses truly are the engine of our city. Also, some of the signature programs as well as individual supports that are provided within our 4 clusters, which are athletic and outdoor, technology and digital media, our green cities, and our advanced manufacturing, would be programs such as our supply chain diversification, really helping businesses learn how to connect locally with one another in terms of growing their business and working and keeping those dollars in our city, as well as strengthening their foothold in their respective industries. We have a program that's a peer-to-peer mentoring, which really helps to facilitate allowing business and business owners to learn from one another in a very supportive way to help them scale and grow. And lastly, working with and trying to diversify companies such as TechTown and their work around and diversifying the tech industry within our city. Some of the other programs that are found in our traded sector is our Portland Means Progress, a signature initiative of the mayor, really helping to call businesses into this place of active engagement to solve some of our thornier challenges and also unique opportunities of creating opportunities for stronger business-to-business opportunities for entrepreneurs of color, as well as creating opportunities for companies to work on and really strengthen and make their culture within their companies healthier. So it's a focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And lastly, creating really important experiences for youth, whether it be through internships and other ways to help them have a better sense of what direction they want to take in terms of their career path. The next program I'll focus on is Greater Portland, Inc., which is really an important relationship. Greater Portland, Inc., or GPI as we call it, really is the entity that helps us with recruiting businesses to the city of Portland, telling the unique story of why Portland is a great place to come and to do business and to be rooted and really have a community-minded approach in terms of how you consider that work. And last but not least is the Portland Film Office, which is currently housed in Prosper, Portland. Again, both delivering on helping just the permitting process, but also helping to nurture the really vibrant and growing and emerging community of creatives within our city that are interested in engaging the film community. The next area I will focus on is our community development. So there's several programs and initiatives that we are currently been charged to oversee and support. The first is the Hill Block, and the Hill Block has actually been renamed to the Russell and Williams Project, but when we ran through our budgeting process this past year, we had it presented it as the Hill Block, so I just wanted to state that change. The Hill Block has been awarded $100,000 to help with the working group in its community planning as well as the development of its work. These resources have been matched by the Meyer Memorial Trust, who is also supporting their community engagement. Next, we have the Cully Tax Increment Finance District. $50,000 was given to support the Cully community on a community-driven tax increment financing district exploration. Really, this is a new model where we really want the community to help lead and drive both the prioritization of these resources and the consideration of them. So we really are, in this instance, responding to their requests, which is unique and important. The next is the Albina Vision. Dollars were provided there of $75,000 to help the Albina Vision Trust really begin to do the community engagement that they feel like is necessary in this phase of the overall vision. And the next was the $100,000 that was given to the James Beard Project, and it's a one-time general fund discretionary to help the James Beard market, do program design, as well as to determine some of those pre-development designs for a location. It also was given in order to help refine the business model of the market and ensure that the market remains sustainable. And last but not least, I want to highlight that there is a Brownfield administration. We received funding for that, and this is a carryover.
Can you hold this slide for a second? I just want to make a couple comments, if I could, because we're going to lose the slide, and I don't want to interrupt your flow. But colleagues, I continue to be very impressed with the Albina Vision, but I don't think it's going to get traction over time unless we create a new legal structure for it. And Mayor, perhaps in your second term, we can approach that. But I think a redevelopment of this kind, looking at how other cities have done similar things, I think requires a different legal structure. And I'm going to continue to press Prosper Portland in that conversation. The James Beard Public Market during my 10 years has probably had a dozen or so different homes that have been, and they used to have a champion named Ron Paul who was indefatigable. I don't know where it's going to land up. I know it's a vision that a lot of people support, but the next, I guess they're now looking at the innovation quadrant as a possible home. There's an enormous gap in terms of their ability to fund their vision. I think at some point we have to call the question on this and what our role is. And then finally, on Brownfield administration, I'm very proud that we have invested in some work there. Our comprehensive plan assumes that we're going to focus on remediating over 800 acres of brownfields as part of our industrial land strategy. The legislature in 2 different sessions now has given us a new tools. I will flag for you that I am learning it will be a very heavy lift to get the county to agree to use those tools. And so if we can't get concurrence on using those tax abatements, we're going to have to look for some other tools to jumpstart brownfield remediation, because we have a lot. It's a big equity play. Senator Lou Frederick has been a champion here. We have the team to move forward on this, but unfortunately, we don't have the tool in place. And without the tax abatement, I'm afraid we're going to have to look for another way of creating some incentives for people to take essentially dead land and turn it into a public benefit. But just want to make those comments.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hurdsty.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you so much for that presentation. I appreciate the words of my colleague. If you'll leave that slide up. I actually hope that before we start talking about next year's budget, that we really do an assessment about whether the Hill Block project is working. I still find it absolutely, I find the outcomes not conducive to what the resources are that we're spending there. And so at some point, we just got to either say it's working or it's not. And if it's not working, please come back and tell us what we need to do. Cully TIF district, I don't know anything about that, so I will trust that the right people are being engaged in that process. Albina Vision is 3 or 4 people's vision, and I'm very concerned that we're moving this along as if it's a real thought-out, thoughtful, community-engaged process, when in fact, there's only been a few people at the table, and they have not been able to articulate to me yet what their plan is. And James Beard, you've already spoken very eloquently about that. And again, I just think that if people have these visions and they can't figure out how to pay for them, I just don't know why we get stuck with trying to help them figure out what the vision is and how to implement it. I think at some point we just have to say, after a couple of years, and Hill Block is a great example, I'm done with that project because I see no outcomes. And if there are outcomes, maybe I've totally missed them. But the handful of people who've benefited, I feel when we come back and start talking budget, there's got to be some movement, or I just don't see how you're going to get support for it.
Thank you, Commissioner. I can speak to the Cully TIF district. So it's really an exploration. There are 7 community organizations who came forward with a proposal to Prosper Portland staff, which includes 2 of the Neighborhood Prosperity Initiative districts, so Cully Boulevard Alliance as well as R42nd, as well as NEA and Hacienda and Verde. I'm sure that I'm forgetting other folks. I know that there's a consortium who are proposing to have a conversation with the community about a community-centered TIF district that would focus on anti-displacement. And this is not a rhetorical conversation where Prosper's coming forward and saying, would you like to have a TIF district? But really, we know that it's going to happen already. This is really a community-driven approach where the community is talking to the community about whether this is a tool that they want to see in their neighborhood. So we are playing a supportive role. Metro recently allocated $150,000 to help with this as well. So the $50,000 that you see here will help with some of Prosper Portland's staffing and administration. But I think it really is an open question as to whether this is something that comes back as a recommendation to City Council. So more to come on that.
Thank you.
I'll speak to the Hill Block. That's something I've been personally engaged in, and there is a group of maybe 30 people from the community. What we're paying for is facilitation, and I agree the process has been, well, it has in a sense been challenging. There's a lot of history obviously wrapped up in this particular block. It's more than just a development project. It's also a statement about the community. It is a trust-building exercise in some regards. And having attended a Hill Block meeting just a few weeks ago, I can tell you I feel like there is forward momentum. I agree with you. I don't think it's an endless process that we want to engage in, but I do believe that there is that trust being built, and I do believe that there is a vision formulating in the community. And I do believe that they are at an important waypoint in their development process, and I believe they agreed to meet in November and call a very specific question. And so I look forward to being able to show this council in the spring, as we do engage in the budget process, that these dollars have been well spent. So I'll vouch for it as of today and the people around that table.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Thank you for your forbearance. Is that the end of your presentation?
It is, yeah.
Yeah, I think we just have a slide that summarizes at a very high level. In the IGA, there are a lot of metrics that you see that we will be reporting on, and you will see those metrics as part of the budget process. But I think Tori wanted to highlight just a few.
Yeah, so there's a couple of just important ones. I mean, they're all necessary, but just in the time we have, which is short. As an example, some of the things that we are aiming towards is, again, wanting to hit that 900 unique business service points, of which continuing to focus on 75% whom are identified as entrepreneurs of color. We also, the goal is to create 1,000 middle-wage jobs through traded sector business development, our E-Zone program, which requires public benefit agreements that increase the likelihood of diverse hiring. And just one more just for this interest, but again, all these metrics really are really critical to the overall goal, is really wanting to have 2,000 youth and adults to receive assistance with job training and career support, with 60% of the adults advancing into employment over a year period and 65% of youth advancing in employment or post-secondary training within that same period. And we'll again, in all of our reviews, be sharing, and these are the metrics that we are
Commissioner
going to be
Hersey.
guiding us.
Thank you very much. That was going to be my question. I think you have some really lofty goals for this year, and it's always great to try to stretch. But I also wondered, in some cases, just how realistic it was. So, for example, when you talk about inclusive business resource network, and you say that we're going to have 1,000 strong and stable businesses in 5 years, but you have 16 partners today. But the plan is to get to 400 before the end of the year, before the year's up, right? That, to me, seems like that's like very optimistic, right? But I don't know your business as well as you do. So that's just a question that I'm putting out there. The other one is the 210 in Cannabis Fund grants. Who gets that money and for what?
Yeah, so with the first one, yes, they're definitely lofty goals. It's also because it's over 5 years, they're ramping up each year. The first year, the numbers weren't where we wanted, and each year successfully, we're increasingly growing in terms of our overall marks of stable businesses. But you're right, we are definitely monitoring that as aspirational, but at the same time, we're shooting for that. In the years to come, we'll have a better sense of how close we are. And the second question around the grant dollars, New Leaf is the one that administers the grant program, and they have identified in particular making sure that because the cannabis dollars, as you know very well, were intended for particularly entrepreneurs of color, and even more explicitly that they be really targeted or focused on, I should say, African-American entrepreneurs within the cannabis industry. So last year, which was our pilot program, in terms of those grant dollars, they actually did go, the two businesses were African-American business owners within the cannabis industry. And so I believe
they got
that's,
60,000 as compared to the amount of money that was accessible. I guess, is this intended to support African-American owned cannabis shops or people who want to open shops that have been negatively impacted by prior cannabis policy?
it is, yes.
All right. So I'll be asking very specific questions when you come back next
Sure.
year, looking for more about who benefited from those dollars and what have been the outcomes of those dollars. Because I think what I saw last year was there was money distributed, but the percentage that actually went out the door to those businesses was significantly smaller than the resources that you had. So
Correct, and I think it was 150 last year, and of that, a number, I think 100,000, 100,000 went towards the support of administration of the program, which was New Leaf Project.
100,000 went to support administration when it was 160,000 total. Is that what you?
Yeah, and
just
to
said me?
develop the program, there was a variety of things within it. So some of it did include supporting staff.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I'm good.
Carla, should we bring the camera back?
Do we have any public testimony on this item? Sorry.
They were done with the PowerPoint yet?
Public testimony?
There is or is not public testimony?
Diana?
Okay, very good. We have one person. Thank you for your presentation. And colleagues, while Diana's coming up, I'm going to move items 907 and 908 to the beginning of this afternoon's schedule because we had an item canceled on the afternoon schedule. And hopefully this will help us catch up a bit. Good morning. Good afternoon, sorry.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. I'm a little perplexed.
Can you put your name in the
Oh,
record?
yes, my name is Diana, and I'm a little perplexed with this agenda item regarding Prosper Portland. There's a lot of questions, and I'm sitting here listening to the presentation, and although there were a lot of words thrown out, there were not enough clarification for myself, and I wonder for those who are watching online or listening at home who have never heard this before, what are they learning for the first time hearing this presentation? There seems like there's good. There's good in it. It's supposed to help prosper Portland. That's in the title itself. But there was a lot of things, and I do thank you for the clarity for the Cali Tift Direct. I think that, having focus with anti-displacement in communities, that's very important. That was something specific that gave me a general idea of what this is about, and that is a great thing. But there were a lot of other things that were said today that did not give enough specifics, and there were also a lot of things that presented concerns for me as a resident here in the city of Portland, because these are monies and resources that are being allocated that if there is not a trafficked flow, if there's not a proper explanation of where this money is going, it makes me wonder, well, this could be going to other resources. This could be going to helping provide the bridge that is going to be.
Dana, just let me just clarify something, and maybe we need to do a better job of labeling things. This was all discussed and agreed to during the public budget process.
Okay.
So there were extensive hearings, there were presentations, there were debates among colleagues about budget. This came out of our last budget. All we're doing today is authorizing an intergovernmental agreement which allows Prosper Portland to spend the money. Today is not the day they were called to come forward to justify the spending.
Okay.
Council already did that through the budget process, and maybe this is less than clear, but it says authorize an intergovernmental agreement. Just so you know, the public process and the debate has already occurred. The questions we had off the slides are not actually directly related to the presentation today, but since we had an opportunity to put some markers down around the next budget cycle, we did.
Okay.
But I want you to know that's where this was debated and discussed. So whatever confusion you have about this limited amount of general fund dollars that drive economic development, we welcome your full participation during the budget process where we decide what is the allocation and for what purpose.
Okay. Thank
Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Commissioner Fish. I was going to jump in, but Commissioner Fish beat me to it. For me, I guess I'm just affirming that we have a vision about where we're headed, right? And so my questions are really based on what we know today. What are we going to do as we come and start the process again for next year's budget, right? Because some of these projects have positives and negatives, as you've heard today. And some of us have different perspectives about who's really leading the charge, whether it's really a community-driven effort or whether it's something that government is just like putting resources into because a couple of people think it's a good idea. So I appreciate your questions, but just know this is really about making sure that we are, for me personally, that I have the marker down so that I can hold people accountable for what they say the outcomes are they're looking for.
Okay. Thank you for the clarity. I really do appreciate that. And so I don't think I have anything left to say.
Thanks for being here.
Yes, thank you.
Appreciate it. Carla, call the roll.
Hardesty,
Aye.
Udaly,
Aye.
Fish.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. Ordinance is adopted. 909, please.
.909, authorize a lease extension with 2020 Portland Owner LLC for office space at Jacobs Center, 2020 Southwest 4th Avenue, expiring October 31, 2022 and October 31, 2024, at an average annual estimated cost of $1.3 million.
Colleagues, BDS's offices, the Bureau of Development Services offices, are generally located at the 1900 building. This is a property that is co-owned with PSU, Portland State University. Over the past decade, the Bureau of Development Services experienced unprecedented growth in both workload and staffing needs. And since the 1900 building was at full capacity, BDS sought approval from the council to execute agreements for office space at the building known as the Jacobs Center. In 2016, 2017, and 2018, the council authorized the Bureau of Development Services to lease office space at the Jacobs Center. Today, BDS expects demands for services to continue to remain high and requires space sufficient to maintain existing staffing levels. The Bureau of Development Services wishes to continue leasing office space at the Jacobs Center. The Office of Management and Finance and the Bureau of Development Services have assessed the Bureau of Development Services space needs against availability of space already existing in city-owned facilities. There are no viable options within city-owned facilities to provide sufficient space to accommodate the needs of BDS, and therefore they are here today asking for us to approve this extension of office space. Good morning. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Pauline Goebel, Property Manager in the Office of Management and Finance, and I'm joined today by Elshad Hajiev with the Bureau of Development Services, and he is the Business Operations and Financial Services Manager, and I'm a Property Manager in the Office of Management and Finance. And so we are here today to request authorization to execute a lease amendment with 2020 Portland, Oregon LLC for the office space at the Jacobs Center. Currently, the Bureau of Development Services occupies almost 40,000 square feet at the center on 3 different floors under 2 different agreements. So the first agreement is a lease with the building owner, 2020 Portland, Oregon, or Portland Owner LLC, that expires in October 31st of 2022, and that's for a portion of the first floor and a portion of the 6th floor at the center. BDS also occupies under a sublease with Primera Blue Cross the 10th floor at the center.
So I don't
Yeah.
mean to cut you off, but my suspicion is all of the council members are well briefed on this. Maybe it would be best just to answer any questions people have about
Fantastic.
this lease extension. Is there any public testimony on this item? Commissioner Hardesty?
Thank you, Mayor. I just had one question. Why are we extending the lease till 2024 when it doesn't expire until 2022? Aren't we anticipating an economic downturn, which means that you would need significantly less space than you have today?
So I believe that the answer to that question is that we're extending the first floor. So part of the negotiations with the building owners, they didn't want all of the city lease space, which is almost 40,000 square feet, expiring at the same time. So in order for us to extend the 10th floor space that they're at, which they needed for a short term, we agreed to extend only the first floor of the space for an additional 2 years. And I think BDS determined that that space was the most viable to be needed for the next 2 years. What it houses is the Portland Online Permitting System, POPS, and has bureau training. So that is my understanding.
Correct. The first floor is most valuable currently to us. It also has the really large conference room that the entire city is using. So that's why we're extending it for another 2 years.
The first floor space, but you're also increasing the cost for the other suites.
That is correct.
3% a year.
That is right.
3% is a normal and customary increase every year for rental space. So that would be something that would happen no matter what. So,
No.
okay.
Any public testimony on this item?
Maggie left.
This is a non-emergency
Correct.
ordinance. It moves to second reading. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
910.
Amend the effective date of ordinance 189580 to allow Portland Housing Bureau to adopt administrative rules prior to the March 1, 2020 implementation date and make technical clarifications to 30.01.086.
Could you also read 911 and 912?
911, amend the effective date of ordinance 189581 to allow Portland Housing Bureau to adopt administrative rules prior to the March 1, 2020 implementation date and make technical clarifications to 30.01.087. And 912, amend Portland Renter Additional Protections Code to add an accessory dwelling unit exemption to mandatory relocation assistance.
Very good. Colleagues, thank you. First of all, to the Housing Bureau and to the community and industry stakeholders who assisted in identifying technical clarifications which were needed. With these changes, the Housing Bureau is prepared to begin its rulemaking process and work with community groups to create training opportunities for renters, landlords, and case managers to learn about Portland's tenant protections. Thank you all for your continued work. We have Matthew Sharbold here. Good afternoon,
Yes,
Matt.
good afternoon, Matthew Schaubold. For the record, briefly, there are 3 areas of local law around landlord-tenant. Owning rentals with regard to needing to register, leasing regarding application and screening rules and security deposit rules, and the mandatory relocation assistance when modifying or ending a tenancy. So the changes today are technical in nature primarily, renting out the ADU or living in the ADU and renting out the main home. And so that's the bulk from 3001086. On security deposits, again, some more language alignment with ORS 90 and the rest of local landlord tenant law in Title 30, as well as providing clarity around using the terms fixtures, appliances, equipment, or personal property consistently through the entire code section, and then giving the Bureau rulemaking authority. While we have it in the ordinance, the best practice from the city attorney's recommendation is to actually have it in the code itself, so we've added that provision as well. And then finally, for both ordinances, the effective date is March 1st, but that would effectively prevent the Bureau from establishing administrative rules until March 1st. And so to ensure that there's clarity in the marketplace for landlords and tenants, we are requesting a change to give the Bureau rulemaking authority immediately so we can begin our rulemaking process, and that we will make go through a 90-day process to make administrative rules so that the actors in the market and renters can be fully aware of what the supplemental rules will be. And then finally, for mandatory relocation assistance, this is a request we've had at a number of hearings that we've had with City Council around local landlord tenant law. It has to do with the current language in the ADU exemption would only exempt a landlord if they live in the main home and rent out the ADU, but not the reverse. And so this is a modification to allow the landlord to either live in the main home and rent out the ADU, or live in the ADU and rent out the main structure.
So Matthew, the reason you're here today is back in March when we were having the fair hearings, we as a council directed you to go out and solicit input, both from industry groups as well as community stakeholders. Can you describe that process for us, please?
Sure. So we over the summer informally engaged with renter organizations as well as property management, industry associations, individual property managers, the Rental Services Commission, Housing Oregon, which represents the city's affordable housing providers, and other interested stakeholders.
And so these are a compilation of this is a compilation of the feedback that you received during that community outreach?
That's correct. So we categorize the feedback into a few different buckets. One, the bucket where the technical changes needed to occur in the code, and then the second, where the Bureau could make the clarifications in administrative rule. And so this is the first bucket in the clarifications in code to better clarify language for either landlords or renters. And then once we get the rulemaking authority officially, we can start the rulemaking process, and some of the other feedback we have gotten for clarifications would be in our administrative rules. So one tangible example of that, we were asked by both renter and landlord organizations to clarify some of the leasing and screening when a building is doing initial lease up. So they're not just advertising one unit, but perhaps they're advertising 50. So that is not in this, because that is a clarification we can make in administrative rule.
Very good. Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have one question, which is the definition of affordable housing. Because what I see is that it says federal, state, or local government, affordable housing by a federal, state, or local government is exempt. And I just think the clearer we are about what we mean when we say affordable housing, right? Because we know people are paying extraordinary amount of money for rooms in people's houses, And so it would be great as we continue to move forward that we put a definition attached to it. Is it 60%, 80% of MFI? Are we talking federal poverty level? Are we talking, Portland metro area? It would be really helpful if all of these policies started having a definition attached to them.
We can certainly do that. We would define it as 80% and below, and having a regulatory agreement with the city, the state, or the federal government, and we can make sure that language is consistent.
Yeah, that's the part that I think is most responsive to her question, because I read that as federal, state, local, that is social housing subject to a regulatory agreement, operated or funded by government, and we've exempted that as a class. And it's not with, they each have different standards for what's affordable under what circumstances, but we have just said as a group, they're not covered. So, but I agree that the term affordable housing is elusive and needs clarification, but I read this as exempting the government-sponsored housing. Am I right?
Correct.
Yeah, I did that too, but it was to my other point, which is
We
just have to be clear about.
We can certainly maintain that clarity across all of these regulations and programs.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you. Great.
Very good. Any further questions? Is there any public testimony on this item, Carla?
She left.
Very good. Call the roll on 910, please.
Hardesty,
Aye.
Udaly,
Since passing FAIR back in June, the Housing Bureau has been working diligently to wrap their minds around this ambitious new code that we handed over to them. I'm grateful for the ways in which the Housing Bureau and the mayor's staff have kept communication with our office open and have incorporated our feedback into these technical changes that strengthen the original intent of the code and provides needed clarity and consistency. We look forward to continuing the collaboration as the Housing Bureau works on the administrative rules and ramps up towards implementation. Thank you to Andres Oswell, Matt Scheibold, Director Callahan, and Tia Williams for all your work on this item. I vote aye.
Fish,
I also want to just acknowledge for Matt Scheibold that was a very helpful and useful PowerPoint. And I appreciate the fact that it told the story comprehensively and then went into each of the various components. I think sometimes we struggle with understanding how things fit into an overall pattern. We hear that also from people testifying. So a PowerPoint that lays the groundwork for sort of the whole big picture and then zeroes in on each of the components really walks us through things in a very effective way. So I appreciate that, and I'm pleased to vote aye.
Wheeler,
Thank you. Matt, thanks to everybody at the Housing Bureau for their hard work. And Tia, I see you over there. Thank you for your work on behalf of our staff. I vote aye. Please call the roll on 911.
Hardesty,
Aye.
Udaly,
Aye.
Fish,
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. 912 is the first reading of the non-emergency ordinance. It moves to second reading. And we are adjourned till 2 p.m.